Hello? Do you guys see me being real tiny? Real tiny and shit? That's me. I thought you'd be changing location. Dude, I would. It's just really hard. Like, I can't actually select it and move it. Oh, I... So I fucking made that up, but... all good. Banger stream title today based on... banger stream totally based on title. Yeah, I felt bad putting a real title today. I might change it to something like Slurpee or something. Making real titles is fucking cringe. All right, I'll tell you what we're doing today. Okay? Here's what we're doing. I woke up today and I wasn't sure if I was going to stream. And then I opened YouTube up on my laptop as I was eating breakfast. And I saw Hirumaredx had a top 10 Mythic Plus Dungeons video. And I was like, all right, we're streaming today. Then I'm like, okay, how do I spice this up? How do I make more? How do I make lemonade out of lemons? You know, that kind of shit. So, it was initially going to be a cat cast, but I couldn't get a hold of Growl. It was going to be Dorky growling me, just with the felines. Couldn't find Growl. And then I just asked Dratnos. I mean, Dratnos is great. Could have asked him to begin with as well. And the idea is we are each independently going to come up with our own top 10. You'll hear me thought processing mine on stream here. And we're going to meet, discuss our top 10, and then chat will vote on who they agree with the most. And then we will have, we will watch Hirumaredx's video together and see which one of us gets the most out of Hirumaredx's choices. So, as we've watched Hirumaredx videos before, and his outlook is going to be a lot different than ours. I don't want to make our lists about guessing what Hirumaredx's going to do, maybe as like a little side project, but we're going to definitely use our own lists as what we are voting with. You need to hide whose list is whose when people are voting because it's just going to be a popularity contest. I mean, I don't know if there's really any way to do that because you're going to hear me making my list. You guys are going to not only see our lists, but you're going to hear us explain our choices and defend it before you vote. I don't think making it anonymous would really make sense. If it ends up being like that, I guess that's fine. Knowing my stream, I actually think it's more likely that they intentionally don't vote for mine than voting because I'm the most popular. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know if there's a way around that, but like, it's not like really important who gets voted the most. So I don't think it needs to be that It doesn't need to be that serious. It's yeah, it's just a thought experiment. Dratnos will win because he's the cutest. Yeah. What is it? Ask Max, ask Dorky when he's streaming keys. I'm sick of watching you yap. If you guys are sick of me yapping, you being in my stream is psycho behavior, right? Because that's like the only thing that happens here. Like, you should be anywhere else. just, it has to be somewhere else. I mean, we're Twitch viewers. There are thousands of live Twitch channels that don't involve me yapping. I'm just making sure you know I hate you by being here. It's effective. It's effective. Let me get a drink. And then let's get this shit started. I'm going to probably take about 30 minutes to make my choices here. And then I'm going to get them together. And maybe a little bit more than 30 minutes. And then we'll have a discussion. And then after that discussion, we'll co-watch the video. And then that'll be the end of the content. You guys should be in for a couple hours of hopefully good content here. Also, if you guys listened to the last Poddycast, I'm really glad you guys enjoyed the first 30 minutes of it, and it had absolutely nothing to do with WoW, but the comments seem to be like vastly in favor of just listening to us yap about anything that we find interesting, which is really good and a sign that that podcast is here to stay and it is going to be really successful, because in reality there's only a limited amount of WoW content that's interesting that we can cover. But if you guys have ever listened to us before we actually made the podcast, the true OGs, where we would just have these talks on my channel, on either of our channels, and we would just talk for like 5 hours about whatever the fuck, and people loved it. So like getting that same kind of vibe in the podcast going forward, and just in general, especially during slow WoW news weeks, I think is really good. So yep. Don't ever skip a podcast because of lack of WoW content. Yeah, we haven't skipped any. Yeah, you know what it makes me think? It makes me think we could also do like more episodes, like 2 a week instead of 1. Because when you open it up to being willing to talk about anything and people actually listening to it, then we could, I mean, we used to just like literally start a Discord call on my stream and talk for 5 hours. That'd be 5 podcasts. And we would just do that like once or twice a week. Literally infinitely, you could do that. Chat, I had a guy reach out to me and offer to edit all of my content, like my streams and everything, and just censor it for dads that are driving their kids to and from places. And I think he was a dad that wanted to listen to my content but can't because I constantly say fuck and other stuff like that. For free? Oh, I didn't actually hit him up for it. I don't know. That just sounds like a lot of work. And I don't like, I am really uncomfortable with people doing work for me for free. I don't like that. It freaks me the fuck out. If you want good work, you pay for it. And if people are willing to do stuff that actually takes a lot of time for free, then I don't know. I like question their motives. It just like doesn't make sense. Not like I question their motives. It's just like, I just don't even I don't know why someone would do that. Unless they're being nice. But like, that's a little too much to be nice, you know? Even if someone was being nice, I would rather reward them for any effort they put in. Or else it would make me uncomfortable. I bet Franck is super expensive. Yeah, bro. Franck is a fucking prize pony. I don't even know what that means. Let's go. All right, stream's going live. Let's fucking get it. Okay, so it's a Saturday. I have 2 hockey games tonight. First one starting at 7. So we'll have to be done with this by like 5:30, which gives us 4 hours. That shirt looks cozy as fuck. Poloey. Oh, thank you. Definitely not paid YouTube chatter. This is the new Star Wars Imperial collection. Has like the Imperial logo there. Star Wars Team Liquid. It's like a button up, but it's a jacket. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that non-paid Twitch chatter and pointed out how comfy it looked. What's that? No one said that? No one mentioned it? They did. They said it in Twitch. I'll send my PayPal after the stream. Yeah, you got it, man. Hey, Max. YouTube Andy here again. Just here to dog check. All right, we can get a little dog check before we start here. Any dogs want to say what's up, or are you guys sleeping? Lily usually wants to say what's up. This dog would walk across hot coals if it meant that she could get pet. She would fucking sacrifice so many other dogs. Not the dogs in this house, but like dogs in other places just to get pet one time. She is a glutton for petting. It's all she wants. Also, Lily is the only, if you guys probably wouldn't have guessed it, but like Lily is the only dog in this house that's like will fuck up another dog if they try to fuck up Reptar or Ella. Like if we're at the dog park and Ella or Reptar like if anyone like comes at them weird, Lily will like tell them what the fuck is up. Like she is a very protective mama. Well, she thinks that she's Reptar's mom. They sleep in the same crate, and she definitely thinks she's Reptar's mom. Like for sure. You think you're Reptar's mom? Hmm? All right. All right. No, it's time to make a Mythic Plus list. You don't know anything about that. Was that an angry shake? Okay. Reptar getting big. All right, we'll do a little Reptar check. Reptar, come here, big buddy. You want to come from that side? Okay, come on. Come here. Come say hi to the people. Lily. We just did this. Okay, Reptar, come here. Come on, buddy, come on. Come on, Reptar, come on. Come on, buddy, come on. Oh, what a big boy. Oh, he's so big. Look at this big old boy. Are you a sweet little puppy? Are you a puppy reptar? Yeah, you are. You're a big puppy. Alright. That's him. They're all doing their own thing. Dude, I actually need to take this off. It is hot in here for some reason. I think I might be getting sick. I'm not sure, but you guys know how you get that little, like, just the slightest hint of a sore throat the day before you actually start getting sick? Like, not like sick, but like just like a little cold or something. I have that right now. I got that little tiny baby sore throat thing. Yeah. All right. Hello. Do you guys see this fucking dog? Look. Look. I can't do anything without her wanting to get pet. I can't do anything. Alrighty. Okay, here we go. So, you guys see the topic of the stream today. Our goal is simple. I want to create a list of the top 10 Mythic Plus dungeons of all time. And then to make it a little bit more interesting, Dratnos and Dorky, the pod crew, they are going to make their own top 10 list, independent of me. We are then going to get together as a group of 3 people, go through our lists and discuss the dungeons and discuss what makes them good. And then we're going to, as a group, watch Hirumared's new video. We are going to see which one of us gets the most right that Hirumared voted for. And then we will also have chat vote on whose top 10 they agree with the most. That's what's happening today. Nice little stream. All right, so to start this, we're going to log on a live character because I'm just going to want to just go through a list of these and kind of just pick out some prospective good dungeons. Maybe like, not think about it at all. Maybe I'm talking like 15, maybe 18 dungeons, and then we'll whittle it down. All right, that's the goal. And then we're going to rank them in order. Max, how do you stream on Twitch and YouTube at the same time? So you can use a website. It's called like Restream. I'm not using that. I heard you get slightly better quality if you do what I'm doing, which is in OBS, I have a plugin that allows me to do something called multiple output. And then just simply, I set up my OBS to stream to YouTube. Khadgar, fucking shut up, bro. It streams to YouTube Natty, and then I also have it streamed to Twitch. The reason it's YouTube first is because YouTube has like higher quality options and higher bitrate options, and you can't do that the other way around. Max, no AWC watch party? Nah. All right, here we go. All right, let's go through some dungeons. So Mythic Plus came out in Legion. So let's bring forward some dungeons here. Let's see if anything from Legion would make the cut. So this is actually kind of interesting because they've brought back a few Legion dungeons, which has kind of like blurred the line between, you know, what we remember these dungeons as versus what they actually are, or how much dungeons have gotten better. Legion was the first Mythic Plus expansion. There was no seasonal affixes. It was the first time they really developed dungeons for Mythic Plus specifically. I've said this a few times, but like I think I left Legion saying Court of Stars was the best dungeon of all time, and now that I've seen it again, I don't even think it would be in my top 10. So that just makes me kind of rethink most Legion dungeons in general, but I don't know until we have seen them again. There's I'm not sure. But I will name a few from Legion that I still think are really strong. Even though if we haven't seen them recently, maybe they aren't as good as I remember, but whatever. So we're just going to throw them on the list here. So just dungeons from Legion that I enjoyed. We have Cathedral. Love Cathedral. Court of Stars. Oh, man, I still am going to put Court of Stars on there. It's probably not going to end up being top 10. Maw of Souls. Halls of Valor. Love Halls of Valor. Even when it came back. Actually, when Halls of Valor came back, it kind of renewed my my thought that Halls of Valor just absolutely slaps. I would have left with Darkheart Thicket. But now that we've seen it again, it was just... The first boss drives me crazy. I just don't know if I could put Darkheart Thicket on there. Eye of Ashara also loses a lot of points for me because when you start the dungeon, a lot of people don't know this, but you can go right and there's like an entire cave of like ogres, and you can actually start with King Deepbeard or have it be your second boss, and then like just jump down and do Wrath and then do Lady Hatecoil. The reason why I don't give it points for it being non-linear like that is because it was never tuned to where you could actually go in that direction. It's very similar to like Brackenhide, actually. So yeah, I think I'd leave Eye of Ashara off. Definitely lower Karazhan is on there. Neltharian's Lair when it came back, not too strong. Seat is better than a lot of people remember. But I'll probably leave it off. And Vault of the Wardens, I think, is like very close to being listed as a potential pick, but it's not going to really scrape the top 10. So I'm just going to... Actually, I'm going to put it on there. I really like Vault of the Wardens. I don't think it's going to make the top 10, but it'll be interesting to discuss how close it will be, which is kind of the point of the content. Keep in mind, by the way, guys, this is not the top 10. This is a list of dungeons that all could be considered for the top 10. So maybe like the top 20. And then after we list them all from the expansions, we're going to whittle it down. Okay. And then we have Battle for Azeroth. Battle for Azeroth has multiple strong bangers of dungeons. Okay. So let's start with the Taldazar. Let's put Freehold on there. Not much needs to be said about those. Let's put the Underrot on there. Now you have some interesting choices. So, I personally really like Mechagon Upper. So, what's it called? Workshop? I really like Workshop. Junkyard is dog shit. Okay, and then we have... so definitely not Toldagar. Waycrest Manor is, like, how well they executed that theme. From the looks, from the feel, from the music is great. I've always personally felt like Waycrest Manor didn't get it. I'm gonna put Waycrest on here for sure. Like, Waycrest was like, oh, the hallways are too small and affixes are annoying, but I don't know. I've just always felt that argument was like a little bit overrated. It was just like not as big of a deal as people made it out to be. And I love how non-linear that dungeon is. You can pull it like any way you want and it works. With that being said, that's also including new Waycrest, because like if they didn't bring Waycrest back, I think that if they didn't bring Waycrest back, you would have only remembered it for you being able to only go in one direction. So if you guys didn't play back in Legion, but you played in this expansion, what used to happen is you zoned in and it was a specific door that was open. And like if it wasn't top left or bottom left, you were just in hell. Like sometimes it would just make you go to the Huntsman side and like, I don't know, it made it harder to time. Like, the door RNG made it bad, but, like, I don't know. I kind of just forgot about that, and the new Waycrest doesn't have it, so I think I'm going to count that version. Okay. How many do I have so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Cool. Is there any other... So one... I want to put Shrine of the Storm on here. Now, this is not going to be popular. And if I'm trying to win the best list category, it's not going to be me putting Shrine of the Storm on there. But I fucking love this dungeon. To give some context as to why, as far as I could tell, a lot of people's experiences with these dungeons was doing weekly keys of them. And Shrine was one of the worst weekly keys of the entire expansion. So normally people hear Shrine and they're like, this dungeon fucking sucks or whatever, right? But I didn't actually do live keys in BFA. Like, I mean, if I did, I just did like some freehold 15s, just ran it down, you know? But I did the MDI at the end of the expansion, and Shrine of the Storm was the most fun MDI dungeon ever. Like, it was just really fun interactive pulls and then into bosses or pulls on top of bosses, and like, it was just really fun to strategize this place and to do it, and there was a lot of options. And also, I've heard from people who did high keys that Shrine of the Storm was a dungeon that was really fun if you had a good group. So, like, this might be totally unrelatable to a lot of people, but generally speaking, if you're playing in a group with comms or if you're playing in the MDI, Shrine was, like, a really good dungeon. But it just destroyed pugs. I'm going to put Shrine on there. I mean, I could argue right now that my top 10 dungeon experience ever in Mythic Plus includes being in Shrine. But I think it might be hard to argue that, or at least most people will disagree with it. But it would be. I kind of don't really care. I'm just gonna make my own list. Okay, so let's go past this. So Shadowlands. Does Shadowlands have a top 10 dungeon of all time? Mist of Tyrna Scythe would probably be the closest for me. A lot of people disagree with this. I love Mists. I love the aesthetic. I love the pulls. Everything about Mists I really like. Halls of Atonement has massive pulls. I would put Mist above Halls for me personally, but... Oh, I forgot about Gambit. Holy fuck. Yeah, I mean, Gambit, Gambit's top 3. It's... Maybe it's number 1. Just a little spoiler, but, Tazavesh. I don't know if that's how you spell that, but I'm just gonna spell it like that. Totally forgot about the mega dungeons. Did I forget the BFA mega dungeon? No, we talked about it. Okay, yeah, no, I know a lot of people have, like, talked themselves into, like, Sanguine Depths is kind of like the Shrine of the Storms. Like, if you were a good group, you liked Sanguine Depths kind of thing. I didn't do MDI or high keys really in this expansion, so I don't really have I got the title in 2 seasons, but does that count as doing high keys? I don't really think that counts as doing high keys, because, like, the keys that I would consider high are probably, like, multiple levels above getting the title, and I usually stop playing for the entire back half of this season. I know Dratnos is a big Streets fan, so I might leave Streets off because I'm not a huge Streets guy, but I know he is, so I think he's going to put it on his list. Does title count as high keys, max 2024? It sounds like a stupid argument, but the other day I heard a PvP. I saw a random... For some reason, my Twitter algorithm thinks that I enjoy seeing WoW players argue about whether PvE or PvP is harder. Like, posts with, like, 20 likes. Like, just no one cares about it, but, like, it'll just feed them to me. Probably because I click on it or something. And I saw some PvP guy saying that he's done PvE and PvP, and the reason he knows PvP is harder is because he's gotten rank 1 Glad and Cutting Edge, and he thinks that rank 1 Glad is harder than getting Cutting Edge. And I'm just sitting here, I didn't respond to it or anything, but I'm just sitting here like, bro, Cutting Edge is like, it's like, it just means you raid for 6 months, you know? Like you could get Cutting Edge and that means nothing, you know? Like, I don't know why he, like, like, you could get cutting edge over the course of 6 months. Rank 1 Glad is achievement by the end. Like, the only thing that would be remotely comparable to Rank 1 Glad would be, like, the Race to World first. Like, doing Mythic in the first week, not after 6 months. But, you know what I'm saying? But, like, I mean, even then, that wouldn't be comparable to Rank 1 Glad. That would be comparable to, like, the number 1 on the ladder kind of thing. But, yeah, anyways, that's kind of the same thing with this, right? Dratnos knows the streets. He was born in the streets. What is that? That's PvP is harder. Well, I mean, we're not going to transition into a whole argument about this because I genuinely don't care. Like, I mean, I've raided with people who are really good in PvP and PvE that would tell you that it's like super subjective and based on the scenario. I mean, that would just be like saying, guys, come on, you think PvE and PvP is harder? I got 1600 in PvP and I got like cutting edge, or I got world first in WoW, and the world first in WoW was harder, so all of PvE is harder than PvP. That's the equivalent of saying rank 1 Glad was harder than getting cutting edge. Like, getting cutting edge is nothing, right? It just means you spend time. All right, here we go. So Gambit, is there anything else from this? Spires, no. I don't even know if I care enough about halls. I think some people would argue halls. I just don't think Shadowlands has one. All right, Dragonflight then. Halls is super fun. Yeah, I don't know. Just to me, it doesn't hit. I'm sure other people will have it on their list. Academy. Academy to me, I love going into this dungeon every single time. It has a deep theme element. I remember when Suki was playing WoW at the beginning of Dragonflight, she kept talking about how she kept like quoting voice lines from the last boss of this, because it's like a professor dragon that's just like spouting out some shit. So like the whole theme and aesthetic of this place, they totally nailed it. The gameplay was incredible. The bosses were really cool. They had damage amps. The tree boss is like one of the best Mythic Plus dungeons ever. It had mass AoE. I think Algathar Academy, I'm not sure how high on the list it's going to be for me, but it is absolutely, I believe it's in my top 10 of dungeons that I enjoy doing. Brackenhide, completely disagree. I know people have liked it more. I just, to me, same reason for I have Ashara. When you put out a dungeon where you can go multiple different ways, that sounds cool to me. That there's innovation all season long, and like you're constantly coming up with new stuff. That gets a lot of points for me. I enjoy that. But the fact that they never made these mobs in between Gutshot and the first boss remotely pullable is a huge minus in my book, to where I wouldn't even put it on my list. Second is the last boss totem thing is absolute garb. It's just doggy. Anytime a last boss has a ad you have to kill that scales with key level is just the most problematic, annoying, overwhelmingly difficult thing about the dungeon. And that just takes a lot of points away from me. It'd be the same argument for Vortex Pinnacle if that dungeon was even close to being listed on here. What else am I looking at in this dungeon here, or in this expansion? Oh, the mega dungeon. Boy, I might get a lot of people who don't like this, but I am just having a blast every time I zone into Galakron's Fall. I wanted to queue that every single time in that season. I love that dungeon, but it's like really problematic too. Like, the last boss kind of stinks. Some of the pulls kind of stink. The second boss was like really hard to understand for some people for a really long time. Dude, why? I mean, I don't even understand. Like, when I'm thinking about Fall, I've literally criticized Fall for the same reason that I'm like, I like Fall, and I criticized other dungeons for all things that involve what Fall is doing. But I just really liked it. How'd you like Vortex Pinnacle? I didn't think it was very good. Okay, I think that's my list. I just need to break it down now. I could put Galakrond's Fall in there. That's fine. All right. Okay, so let's rank them now. All right, let's get some out of the way here. We can change the order of things once we're there. Let's see where we're at. So let's do... So 1, 2, and 3 are some combination of Freehold, Gambit, and what would be the other one? I don't even know if there is a 3. I feel like just those, in my mind, those two stand above every other dungeon. And they were like, Freehold was like further confirmed by being it brought back, and still my favorite dungeon to run that season. So I think Freehold, I don't know exactly in what order. I'll like refine the order once I get the 10 down. But Freehold and Gambit are like way up there for me. Let's see if any other... I totally forgot. There is another one, Lower Kara. So okay, so Lower Kara is... Could be in any of these 3 spots as well. Absolutely love Lower Kara. I think this is another one where it totally depends on your experience. So Lower Kara was fucking awesome in Legion, but when they brought it back in the season 4 of Shadowlands, it was one of those things where like pugs just got absolutely slaughtered in Lower Kara, but that was never true with good groups. It's very similar to Shrine of the Storm, where I think if you were a good group or doing the MDI, which I did in Legion in Lower Kara, like you just really, really enjoyed this dungeon. It had actually endless innovations as to like what was the fastest way to go, completely non-linear. And I just enjoyed the theme and pretty much all of the pulls. They just all felt really, really good. What is it? Your list of top 20 is very nearly my list of worst 20. That's really surprising, actually. I feel like a lot of these are like kind of universally liked things. But I mean, this is my specific list, and like my experience with Mythic Plus is pretty specific. Like there are some seasons where I do almost none of it, and like in BFA, for example, I didn't do any live keys and I only did MDI. So which is really fucking weird. Like there's almost no one that probably had that experience, right? Most other MDI teams were doing live keys all the time. So like if you are a high key pusher, you may have a totally different opinion of BFA dungeons than me, because we just looked at those dungeons 2 different ways, right? So it's not surprising that anyone's list would differ. That's why I'm making a list, and Dorky's making a list, and Dratnus is making a list, right? All coming from different perspectives should be pretty fun. And why my list could look different from yours. But you saying that you think that Freehold and Gambit would be in your worst 20 dungeons, that, like, I don't know what level of WoW you would have to play for that to be true, but that's, like, fucking insane to think about. But either way. All right, here we go. Okay, so now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We have 13 dungeons to fit into 7 slots. So roughly half of these have to go. Maybe the way to look at this is to actually shave them off the top. Like, what are some... We now have some honorable mentions, but, like, what's not going to make the cut here for me? I know Algathar is definitely going to make the cut, so maybe we could just make a... Just copy and paste them up top here if they're going to make it. I think Halls of Valor is going to make the cut. I think Ataldazar is going to make the cut. I think the Underrot's going to make the cut. And that's 4 of the 7 dungeons. So now I need to pick 3 between all of these. Wow. So, this is going to make a lot of people mad. But the dungeons that are, like, near the top of my list right now are Shrine, which is... Like, I'm just going through... This is a very simple exercise. I'm not thinking what are the most publicly accepted dungeons. I'm just thinking of these dungeons that are listed here, in which one of these did I have the most fun? And Shrine is like... I mean, Shrine's there, man. Which will be fun, too, because I imagine Dorky and Dratnos won't have this on their list. So, it'll be an interesting talking point, too. But, I mean, I'm just going to say... I stick with that feeling. I know Hirumared's not going to have this on his list, too, but I love this dungeon. What is it? Frank said, I hate you. 45-second kick class in Shrine was real funny. Yeah. All right, so we have 2 more spots between Cathedral's way up there, too. What are the most misunderstood dungeons of all time? I think Court of Stars is out. I think Court of Stars is gone. We're not putting it on the list. I think Mist is gone. I think Vault is gone. So we have 2 slots out of Cathedral, Maw, Mechagon Workshop, Waycrest Manor, and Fall. I'm going to take Maw of Souls off. So Maw of Souls, commonly loved because you needed to spam Mythic Plus for artifact power, and Maw of Souls was just the fastest dungeon. So people are basing their entire opinion on this off of doing something with 0 difficulty just because it was fast. I think it was cool, it was thematic, but like doing this on higher keys was actually, I don't know, man. When we did this in the MDI, it was fucking incredibly fun. We like no-healed this, and like trying to figure out a way to make that work was really, really fun. We actually the first group to do that of the MDI teams, and then it became like a thing people did, and then people went back to healer and it was faster, but people tried it for a while. Like, remember, me and Trill, we, like, had full Demon Hunters at first, and then Trill went to Rogue. And we, like, I had to keep Trill alive with myself not having a healer, and also saving the Leech artifact weapon use just to keep him alive. I think Waycrest Manor and Galakron's Fall to me are more fun than Workshop. I think Maw of Souls is off. It's between Cathedral, Waycrest Manor, or Fall. One of these has to go. I know everyone in chat is going to be like, Cathedral, but like, think really misunderstood. I think you guys might be right, but definitely an underrated dungeon. I'm going to take Waycrest Manor and Fall because Waycrest Manor, when they brought it back, proved that it was really, really fun, and I really enjoyed it. And Cathedral, I actually think would be the same, but I just haven't... Like, Galakron's Fall, for me, has already made it. And I really... By the way, I really can't explain why. I can just tell you that I did an okay amount of Mythic Plus this season. Or Season 3, and I could just tell you that I would rather have been in Galakron's Fall 100% of the time and never do any other dungeon. And I just fucking love the dungeon. I don't know why. As a DPS, it was really fun. And then I think Waycrest has to be there. Okay, so we have our list. We just need to order it real quick. So number 1, I think Gambit's actually ahead of Freehold. I think Gambit is just like maybe just the best dungeon ever. It just incredible dungeon. It has everything, man. Okay. We have Lower Kara and Strong. I think Lower Kara just absolutely dunks on everything here. All right, what dungeon would be 4th? So let me just start like kind of ordering these in my head. Underrot. is kind of lower, but like pretty good. Ataldazar is also like kind of problematic and lower. Fall, Shrine, Halls. Bro, Algathar's like way up. I'm considering Algathar for like 4th. Is that crazy? Dude, Algathar just fucking owns. I'm putting Algathar up there. Let's fucking go. That'll be a spicy choice. All right, 5th. Let's go to the end. Like, what's at the end of this list? Oh, I mean, I like all of these things. What's at the end? I think Galakron's Fall was the last one I chose, so I'm just gonna put that there. Shrine, I really, really enjoyed. Put that up here, maybe 6. Halls of Valor ahead of Shrine for sure, at least. Waycrest Manor ahead of Shrine as well. Ataldazar ahead of Shrine. I don't know. I think Ataldazar is like kind of overrated. Like, you like Ataldazar, but like, it's supposed to be non-linear, but it like basically is linear. Like if you go right, like it's just the least fun shit ever. Doing any of this shit is absolutely garbage, bad, not fun stuff. Going left is amazing. Doing this stuff in the middle is good. The Sarids have always been a little overtuned. It was more fun when snapping existed, and they made Yasma objectively worse in this expansion. So, I mean, could you argue that Ataldazar got better over time? Like, Ataldazar is like kind of a worse version than what it used to be. So I would put Atal later, yeah. I think I'd put Underrot above Atal. Underrot goes above Shrine of the Storm as well. Underrot's fucking awesome. Love this dungeon. Why do you love it? Oh, we'll be able to discuss it later. Okay, I think I have my list. What I could also do, apparently what Dorky is doing, is Dorky's also trying to come up with a... So Dorky's trying to come up with a list of what he thinks Hirumared will do. That's kind of like a for fun thing that's not going to be used via rankings. But we could try to do that. I mean, so Hirumared usually has like a little bit more like casual opinions. But he does actually do the dungeons and stuff. It's not like casual, like he sees them from afar and does them on Heroic. Like he did Mythic Plus on all of them, but Vault of the Wardens is probably the only dungeon I think is missing from the list. What do you think you'd replace? I mean, I already know. I know if you were to ask people what they would replace, almost everyone would replace Shrine, and I know exactly why too. I don't think you're wrong. I just this is purely my experience with it. And to be fair, like I had the most like unrelatable BFA dungeon experience of anyone. Seriously, like BFA was like the most played Mythic Plus thing, right? Like people fucking love Mythic Plus in this expansion. Like it had 2 really good seasonal affixes. And season 4 BFA was just completely goated. But like, I don't know, how many people do you think exist that played BFA where it would be true that their experience with these dungeons was purely based on MDI and was literally not based on live keys? Like I did Freehold as my weekly 15s on every character every week the whole expansion. I never did another key. And then in the MDI, I just went hard as fuck. Like Temple of Sethralus, I have barely any idea what this dungeon does. It wasn't in the MDI pool. They banned it because of like that weird shit with the orbs. So I just like don't even know. I don't know anything about this dungeon. So like there's like maybe less than like 10 people that actually spent a ton of time in these dungeons, but only in the MDI format and never in live keys or high keys. So I don't think my BFA takes are going to be very relatable because they're just super, super fucking weird. All right, dude. All right, so in 10 minutes we're gonna call them, and then we'll get it together. So I should go ahead and make a list here. Probably what's the best way for me to, like, the most visible way for me to do this is like, okay, Max, Dorky, Dratnos. I could have just typed, it's going to be way faster to just type the numbers again. I don't know why I copied everything. I was going to like go through and delete all the words, but it's just infinitely faster to do this. Oh, just kidding. Can I get this all on one list here? There we go. Let me make sure also, what's that website where you can watch YouTube streams together? We've done this before. Or you can watch YouTube videos together, and each person has the ability to, like, pause the video. No, it's not Discord. Yeah, watch together. That's what it's called. Thank you. Yeah, I'll just have that set up for later. Max, do you think Blizzard started making less dungeons because they think 10 with a mega dungeon is enough per expansion, or is it just the time and budget stuff? I don't know. I'm sure they've answered this in videos before, but like they've even had the opportunity to put in 0 extra work and have like 10 or 12 dungeons in a season instead of 8, and they've always chosen 8. So something tells them that 8 is the right number. I just don't know the answer as to why. Maybe you could speculate as to it being like not an overwhelming amount of work for like Keystone Master or something like that. Like if there's 10 dungeons, for example, it's just 20% longer to obtain something that most people go for and then stop. It didn't Ian say it was art team related? No, it has nothing to do with it. Like in this last season, if they wanted to have more dungeons, they could have it be all the Dragonflight dungeons, plus the Mega Dungeon 2, plus 2 of the dungeons they already brought back this expansion and reworked, and just make it a 12 dungeon pool, and art has to do 0 extra work. Absolutely none. Right? It's a clear choice to do 8. What is it? Works out as to 2 per zone? Wait, what is it? I think they were talking about overall dungeons per expansion, not per season. Oh. I don't know. Maybe a quality over quantity thing? Like, they can make 8 really cool dungeons if they... But, I mean, that doesn't really add up. Like, there was just as many good dungeons in BFA as... Or more than Shadowlands and Dragonflight, and they've just made more. So... Why do people hate Siege of Borealis so much? I don't know. It's just kind of bleh. The trash isn't very cool. The bosses aren't very cool. The theme and aesthetic isn't very cool. It's just there's not really a lot of redeeming qualities about it. The last boss is like you're running around killing tentacles, and then you're on it. Like, it's like, what? You know? Spotter played the dungeon for you. Oh yeah, it's another one of those dungeons. Toldagor, same thing. Like Toldagor, unironically, insane theme, right? Like they pulled off the theme of it looking and feeling like a jail, like really, really well. But small problem. So Neltharis's first incarnation. Toldagor, Siege of Borealis. Anytime a gimmick or like part of the dungeon just ends up killing 50 to 80% of the trash count for you, it's just a fucking bad dungeon. Like it's just bad. No one wants to do that. Okay. Yeah, Toldagor had other problems too, but that's definitely the main one. Okay. Dorky said he's almost ready. Oh, Growl's gonna get on this too. All right, fuck it. We'll wait another 10. Get it right, boys. All right, we have to make another list here. We have to somehow fit Growl on the list. How the fuck are we gonna do this? I may have to do something extremely cursed to make this actually fit on screen. Is there a smarter way to do this? Besides opening up like another program, which I am not going to do. I mean, I can just do this, right? Like, this is fine. This is totally... As long as I get the setup right, it doesn't matter. Just open a second notepad tab. Well, then that's not showing all the time, right? I could open another notepad window. Does that work? Yeah, that's better. We'll do that. I mean, can't I just do it here? I mean, well, what's the fucking... Who cares? Take me like 3 seconds to do this. I'm just going to do this. Just out of spite, I'm going to do it like this. Doing it out of pure spite. I'm waiting for Growl to finish his list anyway. Perfection. Max, when you guys are done giving your lists, you should make a master list of all of the dungeons that were picked for the most for a final best Mythic Plus dungeon list. Yeah, someone can do that. I won't be doing that. Now you have to put Dratnos and Dorky on the same lines to make it easy. Dorky asked, do we do older than Legion, like brought back dungeons? Definitely yes, because they were played in Mythic Plus. But have any of the dungeons that they've brought back, would they ever make a top 10 list? I'm just trying to think, like what... Ooh, Everbloom's really, really fucking good. Grimrail was good. Oh, dude, so many people hated Grimrail. Grimrail was fine. Definitely not top 10 though. Shadow Moon, Lamau, Mists. I mean, just no. The answer is just no, right? The only one potentially is Everbloom. Everbloom is great. Yeah, Throne of the Tides was good. You're right. But I mean, top 10 Mythic Plus dungeon ever? I mean, come on. Come on, guys. Come on. Let's get real for a goddamn second here. All right, he's right, chat. For visibility, we are going to have to put Dratnos on the same line as Growl here. But don't worry, this will only be annoying for me. Because I'm waiting to call them anyway. Just copy the top lines and change the names. I have to press space until it gets there. You can start by using tabs, not spaces. Oh my god. But then I have to, like, learn when to do spaces here. Okay, it would have been faster if I just used spaces, bro. I guess I can get close. Well, no, because then you have... Okay, I can get close. I mean... Super whatever. Because I have to do a bunch of spaces anyway to get it just right. You just tab the top part as well? Are you cooked? Nah. I love that this is triggering you guys, though. All good. There's probably a way easier way to do this, but who fucking cares? Here we go. Will not be using Word or spreadsheet. We already talked about that. It's against the rules. All right, let's do it. I'm making the call.
Oh.
Hello?
Where hell's everyone else?
They're here. You answered the call instantly, and the first thing you said was, "Where is everyone else?" But like,
bro, these guys like take like 10 seconds to react.
Bro, you gotta show up to a party late, man. Gotta be fashionably late,
can't just
bro.
pick up
That's
the phone
true.
right
Yeah,
away
that's
when she
true.
calls.
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah,
so all of you guys
true.
have
These are cool
your,
kids.
you guys all have your list, right? Your top 10 Mythic Plus dungeons ever.
Yeah, I made
Yes.
like a top 10 list for my own, and then like one for like what I think they would put.
Yeah, I didn't do that because I think that's just going to add a ton of time to this. I think it's more like it's going to be interested to see like in a way, the goal is not to
Oh, wait, did
try.
you order it too?
Yeah, I ordered it out of 10. Like the goal is not to. You should order it real quick, all of you. Actually, there's a reason why.
Okay.
It should. I mean, it'll take you like a minute or something. Just think about it and while I explain.
Bro, I gotta think real hard about this.
So it's like getting your true list as close to Hirumaredx as possible is not. I mean, that may be like who wins, I guess, but that's like not ideal. Like I don't know if you guys have watched some Hirumaredx lists, but like
Yeah.
sometimes just an example. His worst raid bosses of all time. The number one is Siegecrafter Blackfuse from Siege of Orgrimmar, which is like one of the best raid bosses of all time, and it's not close. Like it's insane. Like
Holy.
so maybe the literal best non-end boss or like top 3. So like he has some cooked opinions. So like we're gonna kind of watch it on Watch Together afterwards. But here's how this is gonna go. It's basically just like a good time to talk about fun dungeons and your ability to defend your picks. So how it's gonna go is we're gonna all go through our top 10 in order. But like I'll read my 10, and then to determine whether we're talking about it or not, it'll only be if it's the highest on the list, so we don't talk about things multiple times. So like if I give you my number 10 and it's like Mist of Tyrna Scythe or something like that, you guys will be like, oh, I had that higher. And if you do, we're just going to move on to Growl's 10. And then the only time we actually sit and discuss the dungeons and like debate or deliberate about it is when it is the highest on anyone's particular list, if that makes sense. It makes this easier to do, and it also like lets you talk about it makes it more interesting when we're talking about, let's just say someone has like, I don't know, like Halls of Valor at like 2, then like you would be able to talk about Halls of Valor being good, but it would also be like you'd have to debate that because like a lot of people would probably have it lower or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So that's just does everyone understand that? Like how the general thing will work?
Yeah, I guess I have a clarifying question here. Are we trying to match Hirumared's list, or is this our own?
This is your own list. This is what
Okay,
if you
That's
had
what I
to sit in front of a court of people and debate that you are right on your dungeon list, even though it's obviously subjective, but for fun, you would be defending your own list. This is what you believe.
I do think trying to guess his list would be fun because I'm locked into his brain. He plays Disc Priest. He's played Disc Priest for like 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I usually do
I know
that.
how he thinks.
I do that solo, like when I react to these solo. I think that's fun, but like I think it'd be super confusing for us to all make our own list and then all make our guest list and then just see who comes the closest. It's like two separate forms of content. Because another thing I want to do is I want to have chat be able to vote on like whose list they agree with the most. I think that would be really interesting. I'm kind of concerned about that being. Someone was like, it might just be a popularity contest thing. Well, you don't actually know. So like, for example, I was like, well, it's on my stream, so people are going to like just vote for me. But like, my chat is definitely gonna not vote for me. Like that's how they are. So like, I don't know exactly how that'll work. So I think that could be fun. We'll see. I already have my. I mean, you guys can literally just see my list. It's on my stream right now. But if you wanted to, that would be hard cheating. But we will. Is everyone fully ordered yet?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Growl, are you ordered?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So the order will be me, Growl, Dorky, then Dratnos. And we'll go left to right. So starting off with my one, and I think this might be. I'm interested to see if you guys have this on your list, but all I can say about it is that when I did it this season, I found it super, super fun. So my number 10 is actually Galakron's Fall. Does anyone else have that on their list?
No. I do not, but I almost did. I think the boss fights in there are cool. I think the layout's cool. There's like a little bit too much RP for me, and it's a little bit too linear, but it's close. It's up there. I think it's a nice dungeon, I think.
Yeah, Dranos, do you have this, first of all?
I do not know. I would have interjected and said we'll talk about this later, following the rules that you set forth.
Yeah, correct.
Earlier.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to make sure because I wanted to talk about.
I missed the rules completely. What were the rules?
Oh, okay.
Well, it's just the rules. It's not really rules. It's rules to make this not a giant mess and hard to follow and easier to YouTube timestamp, I suppose. But we only want to talk about each of the dungeons one time, not every time they come up on someone's list if it's in a different order. So if I were to say I have Galakron's Fall, then someone's like, oh, I have that higher in my list. You wouldn't have to say what number. You just say I have that higher, and then we would just move on to Growl's number 10. And that way we only talk about each dungeon once, and you only talk about them when they're at their highest point. So we will say Fall. So I'm assuming. So he said it was close. Was Galakron's Fall close for any of you guys? I thought I was kind of crazy for putting this. I think there are parts of this dungeon that just snuck on my list, but like there are parts of this dungeon that don't make sense to be good. Like the trash was really overtuned before the second boss. The second boss had that like jumping and moving thing and the stacking thing that was like bugged for a while. And I don't even think the last boss is particularly good. But this was just the dungeon in this season, and there are a couple of other dungeons on my list that are like this, that I just, every single time I was doing dungeons this season, I just wanted to be in Galakron's Fall 100% of the time. Like, it is just the dungeon that I sought out. Maybe if I was putting this up against some other dungeon seasons, maybe it doesn't end up as high, but when I was trying to deliberate between that last spot, and there were some honorable mentions that I'm sure will be on a few of your lists, so I won't mention them, but I just found myself wanting to be in this key. I mean, do any of you guys feel strongly about it either way?
I feel pretty strongly about it. I feel like second boss trash room was pretty oppressive, especially on fortified weeks. Especially as a DPS, it was so annoying dying constantly. So I guess for your PvP it was a little bit different since you were playing Demon Hunter. But if I ever played Boomkin, it was like, oh goddamn, I'm just perma-dead here. And then on the boss, I was also perma-dead. It was also really annoying. It was also like way too coordination heavy with the whole dispel mechanic. And last boss I also thought was like extremely mediocre / bad. And the dungeon was just like, you kind of just did the same thing every single time. I mean, it was kind of like alright for like the first 10-20 times. Like if you're just like farming your double time or trinkets or whatever, it was like, you know, it was pretty alright, but I didn't really like that dungeon too much.
Yeah, here's the weird thing. I agree with literally everything you just said, and I just love this dungeon. Like I just still wanted to do it all the time.
Yeah.
And I felt like it had to be on my list. What is there anything Dratnos or Growl you guys found? I mean, the one thing for me is for sure is I think it's kind of embarrassing that the second boss ended up working the way it did for all of the season, right? It was like it didn't tell you exactly how it worked. The whole like moving and taking damage thing seemed really unintuitive. like it should have been in the dungeon journal or something, and there was a massive amount of like pug wipes to this boss specifically. Also, like the dispel mechanic without some kind of aura is like definitely questionable, you know? Like
Yeah, for liquid aura.
what liquid aura? Is there an aura people use on this boss from us?
Yeah, you told Bart to make it. You don't remember? And a lot of people are using it.
Oh, I mean, I know that I had Bart make it for the idea of doing that. I just had no idea that people actually used it.
Yeah, people use it.
Oh, that's hype. Let's go. Out here for the Mythic Plus community. All right. So Galakron's Falls in my 10. Growl, what's your 10?
I have Eye of Ashara as my number 10.
Oh, wow.
I have it higher. I have it higher. I have it higher.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Objection.
Objection. Okay, so we'll talk about Eye later, but in Growls, we have Eye of Ashara. I can't wait to talk about this dungeon.
So
totally
if I
disagree.
run it through and all 10 of mine are picked, then I win, right? All right. So my number 9 is Halls.
No, you do not. You do not give your 9 yet. We go to.
I have it higher.
We go.
Wait, which Halls?
We go to.
Oh, good point.
I muted.
The
Fuck.
one that you
Stop.
would, the
Stop.
One,
You do not go to your 9 if someone has your 10. We move on to Dorky's 10.
oh, okay.
Yep.
Idiot.
Yep, you absolute.
Trying to win.
You absolute buffoon. No, I muted my dungeon. There. Yeah. Well, the winning happens later. Okay. So you have Ivashar. We'll come back to your halls then again later. Dorky, what's your 10?
Halls of Atonement.
I'm assuming someone else has that higher.
Not me, man. That was the Siggy Halls.
Oh,
Boys, I
it
have
higher.
messed up. You have Halls of Atonement higher than 10?
Yep.
Okay. Dratnos, what is your 10?
Waycrest Manure.
I have Waycrest higher. All right. Looks like we're gonna have a lot of repeats. Okay. My number 9 is a Taldazar.
I have it higher.
Is that higher?
I have a higher.
Okay. Growl, what's your 9?
My 9 is Halls of Atonement.
Does anyone have it higher than 9 Halls of Atonement?
Doesn't seem like it.
Doesn't seem like it. Okay. Make your case.
Bang. I think the opening area was really cool. I like that although you had to kill the 3 shards, you could pull it in a lot of different ways. There was a lot of different profiles of like pulls and damage and stuff that you had to do in that dungeon. I would say it's not great. I think some of the boss fights were probably the weaker parts, but at the same time, none of the boss fights were super problematic, and honestly, that makes it like a good dungeon in M+, honestly. I think in general, I think Halls is just like a pretty good, like, pull lots of trash, you have some different routing, like, there's nothing really in the dungeon that I, like, really dislike, and we pulled all 3 shards with a Bear Druid and MDI, and it was sick.
It was low cognitive overload too. Like every mob just like did one thing at most.
Oh, that's a good point. So like when you pulled all of it, it like felt like it was doing the same amount of things that like a current 8-pack would do, right? Yeah.
And a lot of people, like, I think every role sort of had something different, right? Like, you do a giant pull, but it's really like, if you're a melee, you watch out for the frontals. Like, if you're a caster, you get the kicks on the guys. Then there's the shard, and that does the AoE damage that the healer heals, and, like, the tank's gotta, you know, live. I think it's just, like, a nice, straightforward, like, chill dungeon.
Yep. Nice chill halls.
Yeah, I wonder too, because like obviously everyone's going to relate to this in different ways, and there is definitely a dungeon on my list that I don't think is going to be on any of yours, and I know a lot of my chat was like really upset about it, but it's because my only experience was doing it in the MDI. I wonder how much MDI Halls of Atonement changed a few of your all's perspectives over like the average, or if like you mentioned that, because that's real, right? You're making your own list. If you're talking about how much fun you had in a dungeon, it's possible you did 1 million MDI pulls of halls, and you're like became your favorite dungeon because that was so awesome, right?
Yeah, I tried to
before.
think of it more. Yeah, like I tried to think of it more in the general perspective, but I mean, I am coming from the bias of like someone who healed in, you know, in Shadowlands.
Bias
so
that there's a
bias.
reason there's 4 of us. I think our own individual biases actually makes this conversation a lot more important or interesting, right?
Oh yeah, my list will get a lot worse. Don't worry.
Oh, do you have some? Wait, do any of you guys have some spicy ones or what? I don't. I feel like the rest of mine, outside of my next one, are not spicy at all. They're like universally approved dungeons.
Yeah, I think I have like a medium spicer, but nothing.
You have some spice, but
Nothing
not
crazy.
Okay.
I want to say Halls and Galakron's Fall were both in my like top 15, but the thing about Halls I didn't like was the between the first and second boss trash that was always like skipped. I just always think whenever there's stuff like that in a dungeon, that takes points off for me.
Halls didn't actually. Before we move on to the next one, Halls didn't even make my top 15, and it wasn't even my number 1 Shadowlands dungeon. Did anyone else? First of all, does anyone have mist on their list? I'd assume not.
Nope.
I think Hyrule might.
Hirumaredx, yeah, maybe. I love Mist for some reason, and that was actually ahead of Halls for me, but that's with a very, very limited experience of doing Shadowlands dungeons at all. And primary. Do you remember the seed thing, Growl?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know, Dan. I fucking love that dungeon. All right.
Seed thing.
Okay. Dorky, what
The
is
one where
your
you change the marker?
Dorky? What is your 9?
Maw of Souls.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Do I win?
Does anyone have Maw higher?
No, man, that place was awful.
Yeah, I left this off my list for a reason. Make your case.
Well, I mean, it was the only dungeon to exist that's below 30 minutes. It's a 24-minute dungeon timer, which is like amazing.
Okay.
I will say like the dungeon had like a lot of flaws, which is like why I put it a little bit lower. Like the bosses were not particularly amazing, had a lot of bad camera angles, but it was just like a nice short dungeon that you just went in and out super quick. It was super memorable back when I was farming legendaries in Legion, where you would just like spam +2 mob souls and just fucking run it down, pull everything. But yeah, like not a whole lot of like super strong cases for Maw. It's really just it's a short dungeon, and it was nice to spam.
Yeah. Okay. It's like if Dragonflight Season 1, do you remember Shadow and Burial Grounds and Court of Stars in that season?
Yeah.
Where they were like faster and easier than all the other ones? It's like if that happened in a season where you had to farm 1,000 M+ dungeons to get your Legos and artifact power, right? And like, so you just play those dungeons because they're easier and faster. And being easier and faster is like good. But if there's only one easy and fast dungeon in the season, then it's not good anymore because now it is the dungeon that you run. It's the place that you are imprisoned within for months, making your artifact weapon good. So I think that's one of those cases of like, if the whole season had been dungeons of that length, it would have been a banger. That would have been so good. But
Oh, yeah,
just one being
absolutely.
like that, it kind of poisons the well.
Now we're cooking Dranos. Yep, like I think more dungeons need to be shorter timers.
And-
also.
Well, isn't that
For
the thing?
excitingly, War Within is looking like that. Which
Yeah,
is bonkers.
we don't know Mythic Plus timers yet, but the War Within, they're like, I think there's 5 3-boss dungeons and 3 4-boss dungeons, and
yeah, but
they,
kind of long. I'd be doubtful if they were like.
Yeah, but even the
20-something
4-boss
minutes.
dungeons, like usually
They're-
it's boss at the end. In those,
Yeah,
which is
yeah, I was
sick.
about to
They're
say-
probably like 30 minutes. I'm gonna say that.
yeah, but
They're
like
probably
if
pretty
whatever
short.
the average, I bet whatever the average Mythic Plus dungeon time is in Dragonflight's dungeons, I bet it is -5 minutes from that, the average.
-5, you're
I
insane.
think so.
There's no
I
way.
think so. What do you mean? There's
I don't
one.
think so.
The 3-boss dungeons, man. How do you make a
5
3-boss dungeon
minutes?
have a 40-minute timer?
Yeah.
That's a big number.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll wait and see. I think Maw. I'll give up a good and bad case for Maw. So the good for Maw is that, or no, start with the bad. So people did this place a million times, and their only experience with it was on a low key. In a high key, it had like a lot of really problematic, overtuned things that were happening just across the whole dungeon. From the little that I experienced that's the bad, which is not a lot of bad. But I want to mention the goods. It is thematically fucking amazing. Like the idea of like being on a ghost ship, and like just like seriously top 8 out of 9, like 8 or 9 out of 10 executed theme across like all dungeons. And if you guys remember what people said about BFA, like, oh, island expeditions were on the slide for BFA, and no one ended up liking island expeditions, or maybe people did, and they when they realized they were a little underrated because like, oh, well, you only really hate them because you had to do it. But if you didn't have to do it, they were kind of enjoyable. Maw of Souls was island expeditions before island expeditions were. It was the thing.
But it banged.
It was exactly. It was the thing you had to do to progress through the game, and it was the most efficient way to do that. But people never hated that version of Maw of Souls. They enjoyed it, where the island version of that, people ended up despising them because they had to do it. So I think that alone is a huge positive for Maw, because it could have very easily been really annoying to do, and it ended up being pretty enjoyable.
Oh, all hands on deck. Remember that?
Growl, do you feel any way about that? You played in Legion, right?
I didn't play in Legion. I think Dorky's just trying to appeal to the people by saying the dungeon that people remember fondly because they don't have to spam it anymore, and it probably sucked. But Dorky's gonna appeal to the people. That's my thought.
For Maw, I mean, you gotta try Maw yourself. That shit's a banger.
Let's go. Dude, I love dude, it's like a cat fight. Let's fucking get it. All right, let's
This guy's an idiot.
all right, Dratnos, what's your 9?
Ivajara.
Is this the highest Ivashar is? I really hope it is. Is this
think so, yeah.
Is this the highest? Okay, I am an Eye of Ashara hater, I think, but go ahead and make your case.
Dungeon was sweet. it was wide open. You walk in. Now, of course, this did have sort of the Brackenhide problem if there was one path that you took and one
Yep.
path that you don't take. But it was cool. There was a lot of different places you could get your count. There were a couple different strategies. There was like a skip that lasted that whole season that you could do to get between the bosses. The last boss was like very difficult, but also I think of the Legion bosses that were difficult, it was one of the ones that was actually like fairest and, you know, throughputiest rather than just I'm hard because I one-shot you every, 25 seconds or whatever.
Yeah.
It did have a little bit of that, but not as much as the rest of that expansion. And yeah, I mean, there was creativity. There were fun boss fights. Good healer moments. It was great if you had to execute class on the last boss. It was fun.
Any other takes before I go?
Yeah, I mean, it was cool, but I don't know.
You
I
could
didn't feel
bolster up an
particularly strong
animal
about-
to the size of a skyscraper and have it just walk up and one-shot you.
Yeah.
It was fun. You could play with a marksmanship hunter that had the Sidewinder's ability, and they could summon seagulls from literal Narnia to every pull with you. It was great.
I mean, I don't know if that makes it great.
It was fun.
This
I don't
wasn't
have
like
a lot of opinions on
super.
Ayojara.
This wasn't super far off my list. I just feel like some Legion dungeons have the nostalgia factor of being in Legion. Mythic Plus is new and everything is cool. Like, I specifically, Court of Stars is not on my list. But if you were to have me make this list 2 years ago, Court of Stars would have been on my list, and it would have been near the top. And then they brought it back, and I realized that
Holy.
maybe it's really not that good. And that I feel like Eye of Ashara would go through that. I think Eye of Ashara, if they brought it back, would be a stinker, in my opinion. You mentioned the thing right off the bat that I think is super important. I think non-linear stuff, I personally have like a bias towards those being really cool. And Brackenhide loses points for this for me. And also this loses points because you can go do the ogres to the right away. There's like an entire cave of ogres, which Frank, by the way, Frank loves doing stuff like this. What he'll do if this is a YouTube video is he'll have like a video of all of this stuff we're talking about
yeah,
while
he
we're
loves that
talking
stuff.
about it. Yeah. And there's just the fact that you could never really actually go that way, I think really matters. And basically, I just think if they were to bring this dungeon back, it would just be one where I had the Court of Stars thing. Could be wrong, but I just it didn't make my top 10 because of that reason alone. But I don't hate the pick.
It was all right.
And then Growl, you didn't play then, correct? So you have zero opinion.
Well,
You played
no,
in
I
TGP.
actually did have it on my list. So I played it during Legion Time Walking, and it was actually in a TGP. So it's one of the few dungeons that I actually
yeah.
spent a lot of time on, but it's not the same version. And yeah, I feel like that. What I'll say the difference between Brackenhide and this one. I do kind of like Brackenhide, but I think there are still like you don't necessarily go that way, but there's still lots of like routing options and like pulling options, and you can still pull things in different ways.
Okay. Oh wait,
Okay.
so it did get you did. That's actually really interesting. So I said if they were to bring this back, people would have a different opinion of it, but they did, right? Kind of like in a way.
For TGP.
But you
Yeah.
guys,
It was in the Legion Time Walking M+, so you could play it like with
Yeah,
the
or if you did
Infernal
that,
affix.
but
yeah, but
Yeah.
I feel like if you guys did that in the TGP and it was part of Legion, whatever, like that's about as close to bringing something back as possible. Like that almost disproves
Yeah,
my
but
entire
I mean, it's
point.
just
I think.
like it's just a couple of us that have played it.
Yeah, but these are
Majority of
your
players
lists,
didn't actually get to
right?
play.
These
Yeah,
are, I mean,
yeah.
that totally makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna do. Okay, I don't think this is gonna be in any of y'all's list, but I'm ready to defend it to the death. My number 8 is Shrine of the Storm.
Ooh.
I have it higher.
Oh, let's go. Okay.
I
Even-
have it at number 4.
What? Okay, we will get to that later. All right, well, we won't talk about that
Everyone
now.
hates Shrine.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. All right, Growl, what is your 8?
I'm preparing to defend myself for this one. My number 8 is Azure Vaults.
Ooh.
I like it.
You have it higher?
I don't have it higher, but I will not attack you for whatever you're about to say, unlike the other two.
Am I winning? Holy shit.
Dorky says he has it higher.
What?
You have Azure Vaults higher?
Wow.
I have it at 6.
Wow. Stop saying where you have it. Okay.
Oh, actually, I'm not supposed to. Oh, yeah. I'm not
Yeah,
supposed to
yeah,
say
okay,
that,
got it. Okay, so Dorky, what is your 8?
yeah. 8 old Dazer.
Oh my
Tall
god, I
Desire?
also have it at 8. Twinsies.
Yo, let's go, Dranos.
Okay, so he has it at 8. I had it at 9. So you... That no one else has it... Wait, do you have it on your list at all, Growl?
No. It's a close one, but no.
Okay, make your case. Dork.
Oh, me? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, wait, what are we doing again?
Taltazar.
All?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I'm just looking at my list.
Wait, guys, what's the key
Well,
again?
I would say like in terms of layout, it has like one of the best layouts in any dungeon, where you can go either left or right, and you can loop back around, and you can go down and then back up. You got to choose however you wanted to play the dungeons. There's the whole argument of like going left or right. The good players went left, the pogs went right. There was no right answer. It just like depended.
There is a right answer. Can I cut you
Well,
off right there? Going right
okay,
fucking
sure, yeah.
sucks. If your opinion of a Taltazar...
You say that, but like everyone's gonna say
Okay.
right's the right answer.
Okay, whatever. I'm not saying like what's right or wrong. I'm just saying like the gameplay fun value of going right is in the absolute gutter. That side fucking sucks. Like that trash is not fun at all. That I would say like, dude, if a Taltazar
I agree.
exclusively was going right, it actually wouldn't be on my list. I think going left makes the dungeon fun.
I'll actually side with Dorky here. I think it's one of the few places that it actually gives you a choice that you can decide on your group. Because in a lower level group, like basically the problem with going left is there's casts that if they go off, you're just dead. Like no matter what the key level is, if the fire enchant goes off, you're dead. And so like
pick
as
your
a
poison,
pug,
basically.
you can decide to go right, and it's a worse way to go. But if you know that your team isn't going to kick that, then you know that right is the safe way to go. And I agree with you that going left is way more fun, and if you play the pug way, the dungeon's way less fun. But I do think they accomplish something that is very hard to do in dungeons, which is actually give people a choice.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah, because
think,
not only was it left or right, like you could go Razan first, right? You could do a big
Yeah,
pull in the
yeah.
mid first. Like
get
you
lost
had
in
so
Razan,
much
get
options.
lost middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And I would say the other thing that made it really cool was the snapping, which is like super controversial. Some people absolutely hate it for that factor, but I personally loved it.
Everyone
especially
here is
during
gonna agree
DFA.
that snapping was a plus, right? I think. Is everyone here pro snapping? I fucking love snapping.
I
don't know if
understand
Dranos
why
would
they took
post
it out.
Yeah.
Like, it's a pretty weird kind of gameplay. It generally is only good on pulls that are bad without snapping, and they should just fix those pulls to not be bad without snapping.
Yeah, but they won't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
I agree.
but they did
I
it a little
agree
bit
your
with
thought. I
the-
agree
the
with your
swords.
thinking, but I mean, I like it because in general, it's like a time loss, and it's something that you don't want to do, but you do it because it allows pulls that you couldn't otherwise do. So it's like an option.
Yeah, I think
And
where
you can
they
do some
landed on with the
cool
Return of a
shit with it.
Taltazar is like fine, because you kind of do a snap with that, right? Like you do the pull where everybody's standing and out of path of the swords,
Yeah,
right?
but it's just such a clunky way of fixing. Like, why couldn't they just have removed the charge from the Juggernauts, right? Like that would boom. right there,
Yeah,
fixed.
I
Or
agree.
just
I
make
don't
it
know.
so
I-
that like you can do something.
I think it's one of those things where it only feels bad. We were talking about like the whole like paying out on developers things earlier, and like why people got so mad at Nagi was because they had access to MDT, and if you were gonna take it away, then they would be super mad. But if it was like that from the beginning, they wouldn't care. It's the same thing with this, right? Like snapping feels bad because we felt what it was, and now when you do it without it, it feels like they removed something rather than if snapping never existed, then it would probably just be universally higher rated, right?
Well,
Yeah.
you would have to deal with the mechanics first, right? Like had they removed the charges or made them counter playable, then 100%. But they would not have done that.
Yeah. It can
I want to shout out as well, like, they did a really good job of fixing the double honor guard pull before Volcall that was just horrific the first time Atal'Dazar was
True.
around.
Yeah, that
And
was
now it's
surprising.
like they made it just one honor guard. They made honor guards less bad. Like you can pull that. You don't have to. You can skip it, but you can pull it.
But when they made the last boss worse though at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that was bad.
that was a goofy change for high end play, but
That's what
it was
knocked
definitely
mine
true that
out.
that boss
it was
kind of
bad
didn't
for
do
everyone, dude.
anything.
People hated that.
It was
No, no,
way
no.
worse for
It
casuals.
didn't do anything. No, I was gonna say the opposite. Dranos, there's no way. Pretty sure people got farmed by the last.
Here's-
boss in
here's
Call.
my-
Yeah, but like you go into that place on a low key, and it was like just you needed like 10% the throughput that you needed on any other boss to get through it.
Well, yeah, but they also just stepped on a spider and then just died, right?
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
were slowed.
Well, depending on the key level you're doing, those weren't one shots.
I agreed with the idea of that, like, oh, there's no mechanics on this boss because you just kick everything from happening, and they're like, actually, we do want you to deal with this actual mechanic. The issue is that it made the boss too much, right? The slow didn't make sense, and obviously infinite scaling issue. A large single target attack from the boss that you can't stop is like a huge problem for infinite scaling high mythic plus stuff, right? So, but it is surprising that you're saying that casuals hated it more, because that seems like the exact kind of thing where it wouldn't be an issue on a 20, but would just be.
No, it was a massive issue. So basically,
yeah.
what Poggy on top was like is you would do the dungeon completely fine. You get to the last boss with like probably 15 minutes left because there was like infinite time, and then every single pug would get obliterated by Yasma. They would just like, because like if you don't know the strategy, right? Like the whole strategy of like tailing behind the boss and the tank moves it along, and then you're like leading the spiders. People just like spread all over the place. There were ads spawning everywhere. You would get hit by the slow, and then you know you're like trying to maneuver around, but you get hit by a spider. That's like super hard to see.
Yeah,
It
well,
was
it's an
brutal
added
for
mechanic, but it was only for high level, right? So like at a low level group, just dealing with the spiders and the movement of the boss was the boss, and it was already challenging for groups that were not organized. And the reason they added it felt like they added it only for high key groups who just knew how to move around and stack and do everything. But for a normal like civilian group, they are already dealing with the spiders and the ads on their own, and that's like enough. And just having the extra dot to keep the healer busy and like worrying about defensives is already way too much.
Yeah, like I remember Poggy Mat placed multiple times, and it usually ended up being me soloing the last boss as a tank. It would just be like the entire team dies within like the first minute, and then I'm just fighting a 5-6 minute long boss or more.
Okay. Just want to throw out something. Do you remember when you guys first started saying civilian, and how like people in Twitch chat would just lose their mind over that? Like it would just make people so mad. They're like, "Oh my god,
Yeah,
this
now it's a bit.
elitist." Now it's a bit, but I haven't been streaming on YouTube for very long, and I think this is the first time someone said
Oh.
civilian on my stream in YouTube, and I just noticed you said that. I like browsed over my YouTube chat, and this guy goes, "Civilian group, haha, ego is real." He said civilian. He said civilian. That is insane, corn. So they're like going through the same process that Twitch did, but just like in, I don't know. I thought that was
That's
funny.
good.
Okay, so Ataldazar cemented in stone in 3 lists, I believe, in 8 and 9. I'm surprised it wasn't. I'm surprised Ataldazar wasn't top 5 on like someone's list. I would have guessed that before coming into this, but interesting nonetheless.
I feel so for me it was pretty high, but I think it got soured a little bit by it being brought back.
Okay, my number 7, and I think someone's gonna have it higher, is Underrot.
I have it higher.
I have it as the same.
Okay, so Dorky has it as at 7. Cool. All right, Growl, what is your 7?
My 7 is Lower Kara.
I have that way higher,
All right.
but a cultured pick nonetheless. Dorky, what is what's you said your 7 was Underrot as well?
Yeah, I'm
Let's go. Oh shit, I forgot to press insert. All good. Dranos, what is your 7?
The Motherload.
Ooh. I like this pick a lot, and I didn't even have it in my consideration, but
I have it higher.
You have it higher. Okay, cool.
Well,
Yeah, I actually definitely have no negative feelings about Motherload. I'm surprised I didn't consider it more. All right, I guess we have to keep going then. My 6 is Waycrest Manor.
I have it higher.
Nope.
Growl, is it higher? Okay. Growl, what is your 6?
My 6 is Algathar Academy.
I have that higher. All right, we're getting into some bangers.
okay.
Your 6, Dorky?
Azure Vault. Well, you talked about this already.
We did not
No,
talk about
we
it.
didn't talk about it.
We
You said it
well,
was higher.
wait.
we were
Yeah.
going to
Oh, yeah,
wait
right,
because
right.
you had it
Right,
higher.
That's the rules of this. If you
Yeah,
don't
is
remember.
this the highest Azure Vault? 6? I'm really surprised this is almost near your top 5. Actually, like I know how you feel about it. I mean, just go ahead and defend it. I know how you feel about it, but I'm still surprised.
Yeah, it's a super bag. I mean, they made great changes to it. They made it so that you can pull and counterplay the mobs. You can pull however big you want as long as you have like the stops for it, which can be kind of oppressive for pugs, but they have like made it much easier. And I think bosses were like all right, not like super crazy, but yeah, like they're pretty all right. And I really enjoy how you can do a bunch of different stuff in there. You can like snap mobs across the platform. You can jump platforms. You can pull a bunch of froggers. I love the froggers. Last boss is also much better now. It used to be complete dog water with the whole slow mechanic, but it's actually quite manageable now, and I'll take fair all across the board.
It just seems like a worse, like, again, I care way more about this, I think, than other people, but I thought it was really cool that you could jump down and pull bosses and things in a different order, and it loses a lot of value for me that they made that no longer a thing, personally.
Well, they only changed it for going from, was it the second platform, like the one on the bottom, to last boss, or not last boss, but the second to last boss.
Isn't
So they changed it, but not like entirely.
Can you still do the second to last boss before the second boss?
No.
Yeah, that's the part that because then you could like go back and do the like pincer maneuver that people were doing in like the MDI stuff with like all that trash after the boss was dead. I thought that was sick.
Yeah, you can no longer do that.
Any other, you guys, you had Azure Vault on your list as well, Growl. I'm assuming you agree with all that?
Yeah, I echo everything Dorky says. I think two things I want to emphasize in there is being able to pull exactly how your group wants and is capable of. You have the rock guys at the beginning that you can add if you get the birds, but you don't have to.
Oh, good point.
Like, you can group the flowers, but you don't have to. There are a lot of kicks, but it feels like you're under control of how much that you pull. Now, you might not if you're pugging and you have a tank. The other thing that Dorky didn't mention that I think is in Azure Vaults that should be a staple in every dungeon is when you respawn, there's a guy that ports you to all of the graveyards at the start of the dungeon, and you get a speed buff until you get in combat. I think that was there was a huge problem with Azure Vaults in beta that it was way too big, and they added that, and I'm just like, oh my god, that actually makes the dungeon so much better for high keys and pugs.
Yeah, the
and
ports
I
are
think
nice.
that should be in every dungeon.
Major facts.
Yeah, I can literally port to every single boss you kill, which is like such a huge plus.
Dranos, you don't
And
have
USB
Azure
plus.
Vault, right?
Yeah, I don't hate the pick. I also found it to be hurt by the change of making it so you can't like jump around anymore. That's something I am sad about as well, like you, but I do agree with all these things being good about it. I also think, okay, it's nice that you got the port out of the graveyard, but there are still, if you wipe on Azure Blade, you're still looking at a minute to get back there, which is tough.
Yeah, that part kind of sucks.
Okay. Dratnos, what is your 6?
Mine is also Algathar Academy.
Academy. Okay. I will have that higher, so we'll talk about that later. All right, that is my, what is it? We're at 5? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm willing to defend it. My 5 is Halls of Valor.
I have it higher.
Really? Okay.
Oh, wow.
All right. I will we'll go back to that later. All right, Growl, what's your 5?
All right.
My 5 is Waycrest Banner.
Okay. I had that already, but it wasn't as high. Does anyone have Waycrest higher than 5?
Nope.
All right, let's get into it. Growl, what's your take?
I like that there was a lot of variety to routing. I think that once you sort of got to the courtyard, it felt like you could open the dungeon up and do bosses in different orders and do stuff in like however you wanted to. I don't like a lot of the changes they made in this current version. I would prefer to be picking the one that was in BFA. I think all of the boss fights are like pretty cool and challenging in different ways. Besides the tree boss in the current version that they brought back, nothing really felt super oppressive or like unfun. I think there's just a lot of diversity in just like the trash. Like you can pull big, and again, it sort of has the halls factor of like, you know, okay, there's the witches that you have to kick, and there's the frontals you got to look out for, and the leapers that you got to heal. And yeah, I think it's just an overall really, really fun dungeon. I think it's one of the coolest like aesthetics too.
Yep.
Like it's like the haunted house thing.
The
I do
mu-
think the
yeah.
low ceilings can be annoying in the Z-axis problems, and I think if it wasn't for that stuff, I think that would be higher on the list for me.
Yeah, that's I think where my list is going to differ from a lot of people is I just in general, even as a melee, am not bothered by the like camera angle affix stuff. Like just in general, like that doesn't matter to me. So like that, like even I'm like have a higher opinion of like Grimrail even than people. Like I know people hated Grimrail. Like Grimrail's not on my list, but you know I didn't hate it because of that. You mentioned the aesthetic and the theme, like. Everything. They perfectly executed the haunted house. Like from the bosses you're fighting to the music to just the art of the place, like it maybe is the best dungeon at doing that of any dungeon, and I think that is major points for me. You mentioned being able to go in different directions. You don't really see that a lot on live because like usually people have like a determined easiest route and then you like try to just repeat it. And the main reason you repeat it is because people are used to it and like success chance is higher with people doing things multiple times, right? But like you saw the MDI, that's where you're really going to see people like iterate on different routes and stuff. And I think going into the global finals, I want to say every single team did that dungeon differently in some way. And that just shows you how much choice there is and stuff like that. And as someone doing the dungeons that way, that is just so fun. That again, big theme in my list. Major points from me for there. But you two, Dranos and Dorky, you guys don't, or no, Dranos had it at 10. Dorky,
10.
you don't have it at all. What's your
No, yeah, I don't have it at all. So I did like Waycrest a lot before, but what really brought down the dungeon was bringing back this season. I think the tree boss is like the
Tree
worst boss
that's
we've
it.
ever made.
That's
it
the
was,
reason it's in 10 for me and
yeah,
not higher.
it's so unbelievably bad that like I just could not put Waycrest in my top 10. Like I think if they completely scrapped the tree boss, I would be like super down to put Waycrest in top 10, but it just like completely soured my last season where I was like, all right, I guess we gotta do Waycrest again. Time to put on your PvP trinkets and do some like super
that
cringe
was
activity.
so
Oh,
bad.
someone gets targeted multiple times. Yeah.
How did they let that be a thing? Like if you were actually doing the dungeons, it was clear it was so oppressive. Like I believe back when Waycrest was out last time, that stun existed, but like either it didn't do as much damage to you, or it had less health, so you could kill it quicker. I don't know what it was, but the last
You
time
could cap form it as well, and then they were like,
weaker,
"Oh, we fixed
yeah.
it. You can't cap form it anymore."
yeah, it's like I don't know what it was, but like it is just 3 times as oppressive as it's ever been, and it dominated that entire key and comps. People wouldn't go in there without mages. Like it was like
Yep.
before mages were even super bis. So yeah, I don't know. I think
It was
completely
fine before
agree.
too. Like that's the thing. Like before, it was like, all right, your tank gets his ass fucking beat to death, and then there's the fire that you have to light up occasionally, right? Which would shit on the entire group. So there's like stuff going on, and it's not like it needed that change, and that just like completely ruined the dungeon. I mean, I will say though, like they definitely made some good changes to Waycrest. Like obviously the whole door being RNG. I guess that was another factor that like made it kind of bad because like the previous version was not great, but this version is also not great. So I just can't put Waycrest in my top 10.
Yep.
It's a cool dungeon though.
Fair points all around. We are at Dorky's 5.
I have Freehold.
Ooh, I have it higher for sure. Let me do insert. So we'll talk about that later. What is happening on my screen right now? I chose to format this in a really annoying way because
your insert deleted a bunch of tabs there.
yeah,
And that's why. Yeah.
So but the reason I did this was because my chat was like, open Word, use Excel, and I just like didn't want to do any of that. But now I'm out of spite doing it the worst way possible, and it's running into a lot of issues. Okay, Dratnos, what's your 5?
Freehold.
Okay, wow.
Hey, yo,
2
let's
5
go.
freeholds. That is cool. All right, so moving on to my 4. My 4 is Algathar Academy, and I believe this is the highest anyone has
Highest?
Algathar. I
Yeah.
think so. There's Algathar on
Unless Dorky has it.
no,
Yeah.
Dorky
Nope.
doesn't have it. No, it's on so mine was at 4 and you guys both had it at 6, Ground Dratnos. Yeah, I think this was just again thematically super awesome. Suki was playing WoW at the beginning of this expansion, and she was like saying voice lines from Algathar Academy from like the last boss IRL and shit. And I just think like that having an impression on a new player like that is super important. Sometimes we lose sight of that. I think the tree boss is one of the best dungeon bosses ever. That dungeon had everything. It had mass AoE. It didn't have any pulls that were super annoying besides maybe like the way the bird trash was handled before the bird boss. And also the little mini boss to jump around was kind of annoying. And then like this boss had like a solidified position within the game. And then the MDI came out and people figured out like watching this was like must see TV. Like every time a good team was coming in here, they were doing something different. They were doing a different route. They were pulling a different boss, obviously non-linear from the beginning. And you were able to like see different snaps and all kinds of stuff. I don't know. I don't know. I just think Algathar is one of the best dungeons they've ever made. That's my case.
Yeah, so I don't have it on my list, but that's mostly because like I just couldn't really fit it in the list. And, I mean, looking back at this, I probably would put it on my list and like maybe replace one of my 7, 8, or 9. And like I agree with mostly what you had to say with how big pulls and tree boss one of the best bosses, super cool dungeon 2, very nice thematically. The biggest thing that holds it back for me is how much required mobs there were. You basically had to clear the entire Lasher area to spawn the boss, and then you had to clear the entire book area to spawn Veximus, and then you had to just like sit there and kill the birds to spawn bird boss, and there's a bridge too, you have to kill the sentry. And that takes away a lot of points for me because like you essentially do the same thing in the dungeon every single time for the most part. Like obviously there are going to be some variances, but the pulls are fun and the bosses are good. So yeah, I would probably have put it in my top 10 looking back at this, but not like super high.
Okay, so you're a fan, and then any other takes from Dranos and Growl about Algothar?
Yeah, I think the bosses, like each boss could be the hard part of the 4 bosses, and sometimes it could feel bad. Like sometimes it could be the bad kind of hard part, depending on the season, depending on your comp, right? Like you could be playing Croth with a squishy tank in season 1 or whatever to it, and that feels like really hard and like kind of maybe too hard. Or you could be doing first the tree boss without a poison dispel without good AoE. Veximus got really hard on like High Tyran. Last boss was an interesting one as well because they kind of tried to change that several different times over the course of the expansion, right? It went from 4 stacks to 3 stacks to 4 stacks, or it went from 3 stacks to 4 stacks to 3 stacks to 4 stacks, and they like changed how it works with like the instant damage hit and making the things. But I think they landed in a good place on that fight now. So I don't know. I mean, there were some parts I didn't like. I echo Dorky's complaints about the some of the pulls, you know, the Guardian Elemental or whatever, being a little bit kind of on rails and kind of taking you out of the experience. But I mean, yeah, the vibe in there is fantastic. There's so many great pulls. The bosses have the potential to be great as well, depending on, as long as you're not doing it with like a comp or a season where one of the bosses feels like super oppressive, which again, that could happen with pretty much any of the 4 of them.
Okay.
That's some good points.
Yep. Hard agree. So this is actually interesting. There's a lot of Dragonflight dungeons on these lists, and maybe more to come. That's interesting, and not a lot
I
of
think that's where
Shadowlands.
we differ more from other players because I think a lot of players dislike Dragonflight dungeons because they feel like there's too much going on. But for us, it's a little bit more manageable, and when you can manage them, it's fun.
Yeah, people were saying, like, I had someone in YouTube chat, obviously, obvious YouTube L here, but they said recency bias. Usually recency bias in WoW is usually the other way.
Yeah, it's usually
Yeah,
opposite.
like,
I was about to say,
dude,
like,
Freehold would have been so high if it hadn't come back a couple seasons ago for a lot of us as well, right? Like
That's
Freehold
100%
at
true.
5 for me and Dorky is that would have been much higher if it hadn't just been back, right?
Yeah. Okay, where are we? We had 5s. We did my 4. Okay, yeah, so it's Growl's 4.
Dranos 5?
It's
Wait,
we did
Mine's
Dranos'
also
5
Freehold.
is Freehold. Yeah.
Yeah.
Growl, what's
Okay,
your
yeah.
4?
My 4 is also freehold.
Okay, have that higher. What's your 4, Dork?
Okay. Dranos Storm, which should be
No.
the highest.
A shrine, you said? Yeah.
Shrine. Yeah, so me and you were the only people to have Shrine of the Storm, and
Yeah.
very cultured take. Go ahead, and I'll
Yep,
let
this
you
is a
start
very
off.
hot one. So Shrine of the Storm was absolutely brutal for most players. First of all, it was a 42-minute long dungeon, and this is like probably my only 42-minute dungeon here. Well, actually, no, that's not true. There's more, but it was really rough for the most part. Like all the trash in the beginning, there were a lot of kicks, a lot of stops. It was a pretty high cognitive dungeon for something from BFA. The bosses were extremely rough for most players. It required coordination. You couldn't just like pug it. Like second boss, for example, you had to constantly kick the cast. You had to have like a kick rotation. You had to dodge for tornadoes. There were so many skips you had to do, and pugs hate skipping. Last boss was also extremely coordination heavy. If you let any cast go off, it was basically GG. But what made it really fun for me was my experience in that dungeon specifically. I was like kind of one usually in charge of like doing all the types of like routing and the pulls. I pulled freaking massive there. I'm pretty sure no other group in the world was pulling as big in that dungeon at the time. And trying to like figure out all the skips, all the tech. Affixes were also terrible there too, so I forgot about that.
You have to sell your number 4,
But
Dorky. You have to sell it.
it was just the experience, really. Like the experience, like just being able to coordinate and being able to do all the pulls was super satisfying, and it was a major challenge for sure. I mean, it was purely just nostalgia and just like me really enjoying how it played.
Yeah, I think this is I love Shrine. Also, probably same thing as Dorky. Well, Dorky, you did high keys a little bit in BFA, right, as well?
I only did high
A little
keys.
bit.
Oh yeah, okay. So the thing, I didn't do any high keys. My experience in BFA was very, very, very unique. Where the only weekly keys I did for loot was exactly freehold and sometimes underrot, and I didn't do any other dungeons. And then I did the MDI at the end, and so I actually have like never done what was that snake dungeon from that like because
Temple of Cithralis.
yeah, because I just wasn't in the MDI, right? So like I only had the experience of doing this with a coordinated group and like mass pulling it, and Shrine was the most goated MDI dungeon. It was like you just snapped everything at the beginning into the goblet. Every pull was massive, or it was massive on top of a boss. There was a ton of different choice you could do, and the length of it didn't really matter as much because we were doing it in like 15 minutes, right? So this was my list, and I had to figure out how much fun I had in each one of these dungeons, and Shrine was like way, way, way up there. And if anything, it's like lower on my list because I assume people would be super mad about it, and I'm glad someone else put it on their list because I just enjoyed every second I was in this dungeon. But I also fully understand if your experience was not doing like coordinated group keys, and your experience was doing dungeons for like weekly loot, and you went into Shrine out of comms, you probably got farmed hard, and your experience in there being negative makes a lot of sense to me. But I just never experienced that one time, and it was
One of the worst pug keys.
Yeah, it was only ever fun for me. So huge
I
Shrine.
actually,
same.
I have some good stuff to add about Shrine as well. I think like that dungeon had some really sick parts, right? Like the last boss, the healer debuff as well, was some really engaging and interesting gameplay that was offered
was cool
by
as
it.
Good
It was
point.
also frustrating if you know, it was one of those things where bad healer, bad group, any kind of situation like that would be frustrating. But I remember like good healers loved that part of that dungeon. This was also a dungeon that really suffered from the lack of graveyard updating, right? Like if you wiped on the second boss, you'd use like 4 shroud skips to get there over the course of the last 20 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And you would you'd hit
GG.
release spirit, and then you would walk out of the dungeon. And if you did anything else, you would get a card in the mail from the Certified Psychopaths of America welcoming you to their ranks.
Yep.
Is that a club? Like, is that a thing?
I'm starting it up. Anyone want a founding member with me? Signing the guild charter.
The CPA.
That's
Bunch
right.
of bunch of accountants. All right.
That's our main audience is confused accountants.
Okay. We have Dranos. What's your 4?
Halls of Valor.
Okay, so we have I had it at 5. You had it at 4. Make your halls take.
Dude, Halls was sick. Okay, so I want to talk mostly about this as one of the best examples of like a revamp that extremely succeeded. And they took a dungeon that had good and bad things about it, and they made the good things better, and they took away the bad things, and it became super fun, right? Like the RP at the end got killed. There were a bunch of pulls back in Legion that you would go into Halls of Valor, and it was basically like, okay, either we can't pull this, or we're gonna pull this, and we're gonna do the Legion thing where we CC it until we kite it, right? And that's how we handle these pulls. And over the course of Legion, they made some adjustments, and they were like, okay, we're going to reduce the mob density in this area. You know, we're gonna try and fix this a little bit. But coming into Dragonflight, they came in and they were like, all right, like we're gonna make these mobs all reasonable mobs that you can pull but don't have to, and you can go in there now and like obviously, you know, it's not non-linear. You do have to go to both sides. It's not like one of those ones where there's 6 different sections of the dungeon that you pull from 3 of, but you kind of can. Like you can skip around a little bit. You can get all your trash in the Fields of the Eternal Hunt, or you can get it in the hall, right? Like there's a lot of different options there. The boss fights are pretty cool. There were some problems with some of these boss fights, you know, over the course of this dungeon's history, certainly.
Oh yeah.
Persia as well is a boss that was frequently like that was the numbers check boss of that expansion for a while, and it was often, depending on the group, it was tough when you were pugging halls when it came back for sure. So it wasn't perfect, but I think this dungeon was sweet for like it was a fun weekly key. If anything, the only reason I didn't often pick it as a weekly key is because it was a long key, and so you would just choose a shorter key over it. But it was a fun key, and the MDI viewer experience for it was sick as well. There was all kinds of creative, like awesome innovation that we saw when this was in MDI at the start of this expansion too. So it gets good points on that for me also.
Yeah.
Jonas, would you have said the same before the rework? Like, how do you?
No. I think this
Halls
one
from
shot up on the rework.
Same,
Like I think Halls was a
100%
pretty
same.
bad or like mid Legion dungeon, but I think this was one where they took a dungeon that, you know, again they made the positives better and they made the negatives largely go away.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm glad you said that because everything you said was like completely untrue in the Legion version. It was so bad during Legion. I hated this dungeon, but the one they brought back was actually like surprisingly good. In fact, like I probably would have put it higher if it was just this version of Halls, but like the Legion version kind of soured my taste. For sure.
I've used the like brought back dungeons to like almost completely remake my opinion of the dungeon. Like Court of Stars completely did. Like Court of Stars would have been way higher on my list if this was or existed on my list. If this was in Legion, like bringing dungeons back gives you perspective because just a lot of Mythic Plus has happened between then and now, you know, like, so seeing it ranked against the current things, I think matters a lot. And then the changes they make based on what they've learned matter a lot. I agree with everything Dratno said, except I want to mention one other thing that definitely gives points for me. This wasn't an experience I had, but an experience as a viewer where watching Echo like buzzer beater that pull the entire forest onto the Four Kings strat, where there's like even an extra layer of fucking around with this kind of stuff that just no one messed with after that. But that was so cool and completely unexpected that added some points to it for me too. That was like one of the coolest dungeon cooks I've ever seen, like maybe the best one. And I thought that was awesome.
What the hell? There's definitely way cooler ones. But also,
Really?
Halls of Valor. Yeah, what the hell?
Like,
What about all the shit that people did in like even the Blackrook Hold snap from last season?
or
was way
Blackrook
cooler
Hold
than
with the
that.
Arcane Mage?
Yeah, like there were so many things that were so much cooler in my opinion.
Wow.
That was like, kind of basic. I'm just like surprised nobody even thought about doing that.
I just never even thought. I think people tried to snap it through the portal, but it was just like no one could figure out how to do it, and then they just did. I don't know. It was sweet. It was cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I just felt like it was like super basic. That's why. But
Just be basic.
I
Then.
was gonna say, no, yeah, it was anything like they didn't do anything special. We just kind of just like pulled the mobs and feared and then melded or whatever and just walked through and mass roots. But I also thought Halls of Valor was like super cool the first time I did the dungeon. I remember when I first did it, I was like, wait, this dungeon is like probably my favorite looking dungeon of all time.
Is the theme way up there too? Like, I don't really care about the like
For me, 100%.
mythology theme and shit, but like I feel like it probably nailed that. Growl, you didn't have it on your. Are you a Halls of Valor hater or are you?
Yeah,
a-
I'm gonna take the other side. This dungeon
Okay.
sucked. It was way too long. There was no checkpoints. The runbacks were insane. Every single mechanic was like so punishing. There were so many frontals that would just kill you, so many casts that would just kill your party. Like your healer misses one global in the Herja bubble and you die. You forget to press one defensive and you die. The entire last 10 minutes of the dungeon was terrible. Like you run up the thing and now you just have to fight these mini bosses. And if it's a pug, you're fighting them one by one. Then you fight two bosses that do nothing. It's literally like 10 minutes of single target dummying. I think the theme was like okay, like I don't really mind it, but I think like they tried to like make it epic. Where if they just would have chopped off the last two bosses in that whole area, but I mean obviously that defeats the lore purpose of the dungeon. But like I think the forest area with Fenrir is cool. I think Fenrir was a cool boss. I think it was cool how you kind of like fight him and then he like halfway through he goes away and then you can decide to like do
true.
a pull and get your cooldowns back. Like that was kind of something that they've never really done in a dungeon or that I remember. I think that whole area is cool. I think especially miserable part of the Halls remake was the big, and I don't know what they did before because I didn't play Legion, but the big guys that had that aura or whatever, and you basically could never ever pull any of the big guys that would patrol. And if you were playing in anything but like a super
Oh,
organized
yeah.
group, you would just pull the big guy
Oh,
and
yeah,
just
yeah, that was
immediately
good.
wipe. If it was bolstering, you're dead. Like a lot of
That's
people
fair.
don't remember that because you're playing with good groups that are skipping. But like that big guy who's walking around, like you just have the random hunter in your group that pulls or the shaman totem, and it's just like, well, okay, well, yeah, now we wipe and now we run back from the Pico start of the dungeon.
Dude, that was fucking
You know what's
crazy.
even-
Growl didn't have his hand up in class or anything. He was just sitting there, just fucking loading ammo into a gun, basically, while we were all praising Halls of Valor, and then he just fucking gadded all over that dungeon when he was asked to.
You know,
that was crazy.
you know what I think it is? It's because Growl didn't do the Legion version, which he would have felt so much worse about. Like the Legion version was fucking trash, man. Like
Yeah.
everything Growl said, it's amplified that by 2 times.
It's
But I
like
feel
if
like
Growl was my if Growl was my 6th grade teacher, he would have just been like, "Wow, this guy's really stupid." But if he'd seen me in 5th grade when I was even stupider, he would have then been like, "Oh my god, there's so much improvement here," and that would be the takeaway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is some Legion nostalgia that's fueling this Halls of Valor right here.
Yeah, I mean it's like reverse nostalgia.
But the
It's
funny
like,
thing is, you can't even say it's nostalgia because literally what you're trying to sell up is the fact that they made it so much better and it's still
yeah,
bad.
yeah.
Okay, I won't say it's bad, but I think this is like one of the most mid dungeons they've ever made.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you didn't see it before and are only judging it based on now, I feel like gives a lot of your claims a lot more legitimacy because we are removed from that bias of the 6th and 5th grade stupid kid teacher thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good take. I think if I were to go back, you would have made me put mine down my list a little bit more. You're making me feel a little bit like an idiot here. Wait, did I? Oh, Drano's had it higher than me. We're chilling.
I don't feel like an idiot. I still like
Yeah,
the.
I don't know
I
why
mean,
you guys have
I
it in top
agree. The
10.
reason it's
That's
4 and not
crazy.
higher is from those things, but like I agree with most of the points being the negatives of the dungeon. But I stand by it.
The student outgrows the teacher.
That's based.
All right,
I
we
respect
have are we on 3s?
That's right.
All right, so there's actually a lot of dungeons that are different in our top 3, as I can tell from just keeping track in my head, I think. There's one that I think will be in all of ours, but I'm going to start with mine, and I don't know if anyone else is going to have this. My number 3 is Lower Kara. And it's like strongly 3. Like this is a top 3 dungeon of all time for me and always has been. Does anyone else have this?
No, I think
Just
you
you.
just go fish.
Just
here.
me. Okay.
Go fish.
All right. Yeah, this is not the one I thought you guys would have. I absolutely love this dungeon. It is the peak of non-linear. I think it's the best non-linear, or it's the best dungeon at being non-linear ever. Especially when this was out the first time, you could go to like any boss first. There was crazy strats where you'd like kill the first boss, not kill that trash after, and then die, and then like release on the other side and change position. And you would like, it would just be a faster way to move, and the death timer wouldn't have mattered. I think when they brought it back, there wasn't as much creativity as there used to be. Maybe because the dungeon just had more time to get figured out. People were better at Mythic Plus by then. But I just enjoyed all of these pulls. I think it's one very similar to stuff we've talked about earlier, where if you were going to gauge this based on public community perception, like especially when they brought it back, this dungeon absolutely farmed people, and it was just not a dungeon you could do for loot and was kind of harder to get into. But I think it was a one that when you did with a group, you would generally have a good time in here. It's just and again, theme, there may not be a better executed theme in WoW than what Karazhan did.
Well, I mean, it's literally like the TBC raid that everyone's like super fond about. Like Kara at its time was fucking amazing back in TBC, and them bringing back was definitely a huge nostalgia factor.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even play in TBC. So my entire experience with this is just it trying to do what it's trying to do, and I think it achieves that at an extremely high level. I didn't really like the other side of Kara, but I thought this side was sweet. All right, I'm assuming you guys are none of you have it in your top 10, so I'm interested to hear your guys' opinions on it.
So I'm gonna say I don't like Lower Kara. I mean, it was alright. Okay, I don't want to say I don't like it, but I think the biggest problem is it's way too buggy and messy, and it was probably like confusing as hell. I felt like none of the bosses were intuitive because you had the first boss that would rotate. You just had no idea what the hell the boss did. Like, all of
Morose?
them did something different.
Both.
No,
Actually, they all
the
rotated. They kind of
opera-
all rotated,
opera
right? Like
defense.
Morose.
Well, that
and
too, yeah,
the-
that also rotated. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like so hard to figure out what is even happening. I still don't know how 2 of the fights work. Like I know how the broom and cauldron and whatever the hell fight works, but not the other 2. And then there was also just like so much ninja pulling, so much shit pulling from through the floor. There were a lot of mobs, which was fun, but at the same time, it's like, what do these mobs even do? And the other bosses too, like Moreau's, you had to know exactly what each boss or like mini boss, like each of the council part did, and that was also pretty confusing. The Horseman too, whatever his name is, Attunement or whatever, that was also extremely confusing. That was a terrible boss.
Yeah.
The only thing that was like, intuitive was Maiden. And even then, like it wasn't like super intuitive for the first time. I'm pretty sure like most people got stunned or repentanced. when they
Also,
first
Maiden
did it.
had a really hard. It's maybe designed as the like hardest boss to do without comms, with an actual legit DPS check shield and the need of the tuning to like actually have your cooldown spread out. Like that's something that probably farmed a bunch of people. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier. I actually forgot. Growl actually did have this on his list as well. I didn't want it. No Growl erasure over here. I'll
Wait,
allow
what,
him to
lower
defend
Kara?
it. Yeah, he had
But
lower
mine
Kara
was
at
lower,
7.
but it
He
was
had it. He
lower.
had it at 7.
Oh.
Yeah, his lower was lower.
Yeah, and one other thing is, you also just had no idea where the hell you were half the time. The layout of the dungeon was kind of confusing.
All right. Growl, do you have any,
Well,
any
actually,
thoughts?
yeah, I'll actually chime in. So I had it at 7. I like this dungeon. Now, keep in mind, I only played it during the bringback. I didn't play in Legion. What Dorky said about you get lost in the dungeon, I'm actually going to give that a plus. I think with how formulaic and how standard all the dungeons are, having something that actually feels like a dungeon with like different paths and like routes, and you don't actually know where stuff leads and different things lead to different areas is super, super cool. I also thought that there were also, lots of different routings and different pull sizes, and you could pull really, really big, lots of trash in there. But I also agree with Dorky that there were problems with it, especially in Pugs. I think the less organized group that you played with, the harder it was. The bosses definitely had a very steep learning curve. I think there were obviously mobs that were great to pull and mobs that were, bad to pull. And I think that overall, I think it's a really cool dungeon, but I played it way less than everyone else did. And also keep in mind, the season that it was brought back was Shrouded, right? Where you like get the buff and you stack up and you have like Omega Haste, and that also like makes the routing
Oh,
and pulling
such a
lot
good
more
point.
interesting as well. That a lot of people who, if they didn't play that take or that era, might not have the same take.
Wait,
So
what
I think.
haste?
Remember Shrouded, where you have to find the ghosts and you
Oh,
kill them
you're
and you
talking
get
about-
the
okay, I was
stacking
thinking about
buffs?
the
Yeah,
dungeon.
well, I just think
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
really right about that too, and I wonder, this is kind of a broader retrospective thing, but I wonder how our dungeon opinions have changed, or how much it impacted this list, that like some of these dungeons existed with really, really good seasonal affixes, and some dungeons we only saw with really bad ones,
Yep. But yeah, overall, I think it was definitely a cool dungeon. Like, I can 100% see how someone would have it in top 3, but I think it's not good enough to be in the top 3.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so moving on to Growl's 3.
I don't think I'll have much contention on this. My number 3 is Gambit.
I have Gambit higher.
I have
Yeah,
Gambit
same.
higher.
Yep.
All right, cool. Dorky?
I have Sanguine Depths.
Woo! I was not expecting that.
I'm
Really?
expecting Growl to say he has it higher.
I have it higher.
Wow!
there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Whoa! Oh my god.
Sanguine Depths is a banger.
Okay, that
Hey,
that
Jarvis?
I would not have guessed.
I
that.
do not have that higher.
Did I just lose all my points with the people after that lower Kara? And
Yeah, the Halls of Valor defense.
Yeah, that is
Goodbye,
fucking insane. I
enjoyed being...
I can't even have. I guess we'll wait. I was about to talk about Sanguine, but we have to wait. Dratnos, what's your 3?
Tazavesh Streets.
I do not have that higher. Does anyone else have Streets at all?
I don't have it at all.
All right, talk about
Alright,
Tazzy Streets.
Look, that dungeon was cool, man. It passed the vibe check with flying colors, like the things you're talking about Algathar being great for people zoning in and being like, wow, this place is sick. For me, I don't think there was necessarily any dungeon that did that better than Streets, because like Gambit was cool, but Gambit wasn't in the Tazavesh City part, which was so cool. And there were a couple of pulls that were somewhat suspicious in there. I'll give you guys that. There were some mobs that they could have changed, but the fights in there, I think they have tried with a lot of dungeons. Like Dawn of the Infinite, you can see with a lot of these bosses, they've tried to make interesting kind of raid-style boss fights, and I think they've never done it better than they did in Tazavesh. You have a fight like Solia, where it's like, these are actual mechanics going on. You have to actually think about how you want to, or not Solia, sorry. What's the end one? So Asmi or whatever, the end of Streets boss, where it's like dividing the room up and you're porting around with portals and using the color thing. I think that like the boss fights were actually interesting and engaging and mechanically, cool without actually being like brutally hard or overtuned numerically either. So again, there were some parts of this dungeon that were mid at best, but the highs were very high for me, and the vibe was fantastic.
I hated the first boss. That was my only thing.
Oh
Like,
man, that was one of the worst bosses they've ever
Yeah,
made.
yeah. Okay, look, but it's not like you had to kill the first boss to get to the rest of the dungeon. I guess you kind of did, if you want to think about it.
You absolutely did.
What are you
mean?
fucking
couldn't even
talking
open the
about?
door.
All right. Maybe that is
What
true.
are you saying here, Giles?
yeah,
Yeah.
that boss was a fucking
Okay,
huge
maybe
thing.
that's not
I think that boss being replaced with an average Mythic Plus dungeon boss would have this on every single one of our lists, though. Pretty
No,
sure.
no.
That's
I
fair.
also thought Menagerie was a pretty
Yeah,
annoying
Menagerie
boss. It was
is the
so
music
annoying.
boss.
I hated that fight.
Dude, the music.
I mean,
boss
the music
was,
boss wasn't
cool
even a
only
fight.
the
I mean,
first-
I thought the
well.
music boss was whatever. It was not even.
You
a
guys
fight.
didn't like
It
that you
was-
could randomly get the like RNG spawn path or whatever to cost 20 seconds and change who won an MDI match?
I don't remember that. Not gonna lie.
That was some big drama.
Oh yeah, I don't remember that at all.
All I know, speaking of MDI, is that it's interesting that I think, like, especially with Sanguine Depths, I think you guys did, like, some TGP or MDI kind of stuff with that. And I know that some of these dungeons on my list only exist because I did them in the MDI, and I wonder how much my perspective would have changed if I did MDIs with a lot of these dungeons on there, both making them higher and lower. Because, like, you could go from not liking a dungeon at all to thinking it's one of the best just because of interacting with it in that way.
Yeah, my other problems with Streets was there was a little bit too much RP for my liking. There was just too much idle time, too much like trying to figure out how to min-max what you're gonna do during that. But
One thing I was
I
saying-
guess it was alright. There you go.
Oh, what I wanted to say in Dratnos' defense about the RP was that not only did they reduce some of it from M0, but they also, I felt, gave you enough counterplay to the RP. Like, the RP in some places, I'm not saying it's good, but the RP in some places is just like you're standing there waiting to hear an
Snowball.
NPC talk. But with Streets, it's like, okay, you need to go here to trigger something. So it's like, okay, you split off and you do this and you do this. And there is at least some routing and some counterplay, which I would prefer if that's not really in the dungeon. But if it is in the dungeon, which they're not going to remove it, I think that's the best option, is to have the counterplay. But I think, I don't know, there was just, it felt like a lot of the stuff in that dungeon there was counterplay to, but I think the first boss was just miserable. I think, I don't know, I didn't really like I think the bosses were all, they felt to me like the mega dungeon and doing it in hard mode was meant, like, you were only meant to do it 1 or 2 times. And I think that the first impressions of the bosses was really cool. And then after that, the replayability of the bosses was terrible. Like, even So Asmi with the circles and stuff, like, the first time you did that, it was one of the coolest things ever. And it was like, man, when you did it on hard mode. But then doing it, like, then you sort of realize what's happening and you're like, okay, well, I just need to see what portal I need to go into and then go into it. And that was literally the only mechanic of the fight.
Yeah. I'm surprised at the amount of Shadowlands stuff on this, on the list, for sure.
Is there really that many?
I mean, between all of our lists, it includes both Mega Dungeons and 2 more Shadowlands dungeons. That's,
I mean, yeah.
what, like
Gambit's just a
30% of the
major hit.
dungeons that were introduced in that expansion? Or 40%? Something like that? Like, that's... Shadowlands does not have a generally high approval rating, but it's also... one of those recency, and I almost put Mists on my list too, and I think it has generally not highly thought of dungeons.
Yeah, I tried to balance and like have. I think overall I didn't really like move stuff because of that, but I did try and I tried to make sure I had different dungeons or different expansions.
I have like nothing from Legion. I'm looking at this.
Yeah, well, mine is hard. That's why I kind of threw mine a little bit lower, because my Legion experience isn't as fair. But like you had mentioned, you thought there was a lot of Dragonflight dungeons, but I actually think it's like pretty well balanced, and for me at least, leaning more towards BFA.
Dude, I can't wait to hear the Motherlode take and the Sanguine take. That is going to be...
Oh, I'm ready.
that
I'm
is
ready
gonna
for
be
both of them.
Spoilers?
Yeah.
know.
Well, yeah. Someone said they had Motherlode higher earlier.
Yeah, Dratnos put it as a 7.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we know that somebody
Right,
could
yeah,
have it
yeah,
higher.
Yeah. Okay. Are we at 2? My 2? All right, my 2 is Freehold.
Think so.
Everyone's had
Yep.
Freehold. 2 of you had it at 5. 1 of you had it at 4.
Yeah.
So generally high approval rating of Freehold. I'm interested to hear from you 3 whether it being brought back lowered it or increased it. But I think they nailed the theme. For even like this is probably a pretty universally high approval because like a lot of people just did Freehold as their like loot key, and a lot of people are always going to fondly remember keys they did just to like go in on a 20 or back then on a 15 to get gear. Thematically nailed it. Bunch of pirate stuff. Big mobs you could pull that were never really doing too much, and you could kind of pull them in any order to make it work. Stuff at the beginning I thought was always a fun big pull you did before the first boss. You definitely lose a little bit of points because like I feel like the first boss was never done super well. I think they made it a little bit better when they brought it back, but and I think this boss got huge points on the first time it was out with Awakened. I think this was one of the cooler Awakened dungeons, and like the amount of stuff you could choose to do on the last boss. That's it. I'm sure everyone has some takes on Freehold, but I just am always happy when it comes into this place, and it's been in 2 BFA. It's been in like 2 seasons so far, like all of BFA, and then it was brought back this expansion, and every single time it was my favorite dungeon that season. So that's why I had it too.
Yeah, by far the biggest thing with Freehold is it is the least cognitive overload dungeon, and I don't think it's even close. There's like almost no kicks to really worry about throughout the entire dungeon, and it's mostly just stay alive, tank damage, pull big, avoid shit, and just blast. I will say though, the bosses kind of sucked in that dungeon. Like I think by far the weakest point of Freehold were the bosses. I feel like Freehold is just super bland to me. It's like vanilla ice cream. Like it's good and I like it, but I don't also feel too strongly about it. But I do think more dungeons should be like Freehold, where it's super open and you can do whatever the fuck you want, and you're not just like overloaded with shit happening.
That is a good point about the bosses. Like I'm just like thinking about each boss singularly, and like I mean the like pit boss, the one where you're fighting the shark guy, like that boss stinks. The I don't know if do you feel strongly about like the last boss or the second boss? The second boss with the RNG with Bad Brews is kind of bad.
Dude, you guys remember the second boss back when it rotated weekly and you could get Captain Eudora or not Captain
Oh
Eudora?
Jesus, yeah.
BFA, I think Freehold, the trash design and like the routing was way more cool, but I think the bosses were miserable. And I just want to echo Dorky's statement that everything about the dungeon was so awesome, and the bosses are like what holds it back from being #1. Like regardless of what era that you think about, like I think the bosses just had major problems.
Yep.
Nope.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Freehold. Everyone likes Freehold. All right. Growl. What's your 2?
Ooh, if I know my co-hosts, I think I won't get. I'll get contented on this one, but my #2 is Underrot.
Okay. Does anyone have
I
Underrot
also
higher?
have it at 2.
Okay.
Holy, I
Wait.
have it at 7.
You. Okay, Dratnos. You
I
have it at 2
also
as well?
think Dratnos has it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have it
Okay.
at 2.
So let's let Dorky do his 2, and then we'll talk about Underrot when we get to Dranos.
Okay.
What's your 2,
I
Dork?
have Gambit.
I have
Idiot. I have it higher.
I have Gambit higher, yeah.
You have to guess which spot I have it in, but I have it higher than 2.
0 maybe.
Ooh, extra dungeon. Procced an extra one. All right, Dratnos and Growl, what are your all's feelings about the old Underrot?
I'll let Growl go first. I think
Sure.
he's
Right.
higher up.
I think overall, the Underrot is one of the best mixes of everything about dungeons. I think it's linear enough that you don't get confused and like pugs, but there's enough routing changes of like what you want to pull. I think the second boss room is especially a masterpiece in that you can pull it in tons and tons of different ways, depending on what your group is capable of, what comp you have. I think all of the bosses are different sorts of exercises that none of them felt really super oppressive, except for like maybe the first boss was a lot of kicks. I don't know. Overall, I think just Underrot was like a really good dungeon, and I think there's very little that you can say that's bad about it. I think the worst thing that I'll have to say, and I enjoyed the BFA version more, was that they added count. They basically made you pull more of the dungeon, which caused you to pull the weird stuff at the end, like in between third and fourth boss. And I think that trash generally was not good or not really fun. But in BFA, you just could skip all of it because you didn't need to pull that. So overall, I think Underrot's a banger.
Dratty?
Yeah, I think they did make it slightly worse at the end. Like, worms would have been kind of fine if they weren't rooted to where they were, but that part just made that area so clunky to navigate. So that is definitely minus some points. But yeah, I think the boss design was generally good in there. You had a little bit of everything, right? Like you had healer check fights, but not really one-shotty fights. I guess you had the big explosion on third boss that was a little bit like that, but it was pretty infrequent, and it was kind of the only thing like it in that place. You had it was a linear dungeon in the sense that you started with boss 1 and you walked through to boss 4, but you could go left and right at the start. You could pull more or less around there. You could go left or right towards the second boss room. You obviously had to pull like the whole second boss room, but then after that you could go left or right to the third boss. You could go left or right to the fourth boss, right? And like all of those options, and either pulling more or less in those areas, skipping more or less, were somewhat supported, depending on whether it was the BFA version or the recent version. They tweaked that a little bit, but the core was still there, and that it was one of those dungeons where you could hold W and be fine, or you could actually like pop open MDT and spend a long time thinking about, okay, actually, where do we want to get these last 10% that we need? And that I think is a really good middle ground between the like fully non-linear and fully linear dungeons. And yeah, I mean, it was a vibe. It was one of those dungeons that you were always kind of happy to see. If anything, that kind of makes it gets close to the Maw of Souls, Shadow and Burial Grounds part, where it's like actually minus points, because that season, if you did exclamation point keys and you saw an Underrot, you went to the Underrot, the most recent one, like when it came back in Dragonflight, and that was maybe bad.
Well, I was gonna ask, did it coming back increase or decrease your appreciation of Underrot, or keep it the same?
I think it stayed about the same. Yeah, I think
decrease.
You think decrease? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with like whatever everyone's been saying, but for me, it definitely decreased it a little bit. We definitely made improvements, but I feel like the whole change towards the end of the dungeon really ruined it. As you mentioned, Drenos. I will say though, Underrot, maybe I should have ranked this higher, because like the more I think about it, I've always used Underrot as like the gold standard for general dungeon design.
Oh, it definitely
You know
is.
how, yeah, like remember how I talked about Algafar Academy and how like you had to fight the same stuff every single time. You were basically forced, like you had to fight the bridge, you had to fight the bird, etc. What's really nice about Underrot is you can pick and choose how much you pull and what you pull. Like, even though every single player is going to be pulling roughly the same mobs, like yeah, you're going to be pulling blobs and swarmers, etc., lashers, but if you were a not as experienced group, you could have pulled less lashers, you could have pulled, maybe a blob and like one swarmer. Or if you were a really good group, you could have pulled the entire like half of Krog's room and then do another half and just go boss right after. And I think that choice that you can make is like such a well designed in a dungeon. Aside from that, I also really like how, how we've talked about in the Poddycrew, each mob has like one mechanic that players have to deal with. That goes really hard in Underrot, and I wish more dungeons did that.
Yeah. I probably could have had it higher too. Big shout out to the second room being an open canvas that you can do in any way you want. Like the one before the second boss.
That's such a good example as well of like the mobs do stuff. Like every mob does something, so it's not like the freehold cheat code of just make the mobs not actually do anything. The mobs do stuff, and you can still pull like different numbers of them, and you have options. It's so good.
All right, we are now to the ones. I think Dratnus and I have both the same number one, so we'll discuss mine when we get to his, but my number one is Gambit. And I want to hear Growl's, because if I'm keeping track of things in my head a lot, Growl's about to fucking spit some crazy shit. So, Growl, what is your number one?
My number one dungeon of all time is Sanguine Depths.
Hell yeah.
Okay,
there it is.
Let the good people know. Speak that good word.
Alright, so aside from like needing a covenant, which I don't really factor in, Sanguine Depths had what I think is by far the most interesting and cool mechanic in any dungeon ever, which was the lanterns that you pull mobs to, and the more mobs that you pull in the lanterns, you get a damage buff, and not like some little, 5% versatility, I'm Algathar. You would get a 50% damage buff, and you would be absolutely blasting. And the strategy and fun implications of not only trying to pull into the canisters while also like thinking about what you're going to do after that, I thought was really, really super cool. I think in terms of boss design, all of the bosses were very tough. And I know that a lot of people want easier, more simple dungeons, but I think that all of the bosses were very tough but very fair, and I had a lot of fun. This might be healer bias, but I had a lot of fun healing and dealing with all of the bosses in that dungeon. I think there are definitely some things you can take away from it. The biggest complaints that I think are it's maybe a bit too long. I think the gauntlet at the end, I think people got really good at it, but it was really frustrating at first. And also there are some camera issues, but personally I didn't really, a lot of people complain about that, but I didn't really have those. But overall, I think Sanguine just has the best collection of bosses. I think it has the coolest dungeon mechanic. I think even though it was a hard dungeon, it wasn't hard in a way where it's like, oh, here's 8 casters and you have to chain CC all of these. It's hard in the sense that like you're pulling massive and there's frontals everywhere and you're like trying, you're blasting and your damage is super important because you have this canister going. And like, I think it was challenging, but it was challenging in all of the really fun ways that makes M+ fun.
Yep, and I also think the whole idea of figuring out how you play around your lantern and how you extend it and how you carry it and where you plan your CDs, like that, all that adds so much to Sanguine Depths. Also, I gotta say, like, one of the big reasons why Sanguine Depths is so high for us is because the first time we ever played in the MDI, we completely crushed Echo in the cups, and we were the cup winners with Sanguine Depths, and we caused Gingy to slam his fucking chair in rage, and that was amazing.
It will always have a special place in our heart for that. There may be a little bias there, but for sure it's up there.
Well,
for me,
bias
even
matters.
without
That's
that.
why we have 4 different lists. Like I said, if dude, I can't even rate Sanguine Depths because I'm serious. I don't think I've done that dungeon more than 5 times. I did 1 season with Sanguine Depths in it, and I know that I did it 3 times. Once on Tyran, once on Fortified, and then another hierarchy on Fortified, and never again. So like I have just no opinion. And as we saw before, doing something on the MDI can totally change your opinion of it. And when you have something like a 50% damage increase that you can chain, that sounds like something that'd be awesome in the MDI. But I want to point out something that I think is super interesting. So if you boil it down, I attach a negative to dungeons like Toldagor or Neltharis, or dungeons where a like gimmick
Cannons
is killing a ton of your trash count. Like I just think that's dog shit. But Sanguine Depths kind of did that. But all they did was they gave your characters the power instead of the item killing the things in a way. And I think that's a huge difference. And I think that's something they should explore more. Like your characters feeling powerful is sick, and random chains and cannons killing stuff sucks.
Yeah. I will echo that point being good. Like, fundamentally, it means there's a difference. Like, in Sanguine Depths, if you get a big lantern pull, you press your cooldowns, and it's all about, like, optimizing them, and you're having a blast. Whereas in Necrotic Wake, you hold your cooldowns because you know the weapons are going to kill this, and the most useful thing you can be doing is helping that happen, right? Is using utility and CCs and stops and stuff, and that experience is a lot less satisfying. So I agree that is a positive of that style, but I can't put this thing on my list. Like, you can't... If I was going into a guild group and we were going to do some keys that season, and we did exclamation point keys, and Sanguine Depths came up alongside, like, Mist, Wake, Plaguefall or whatever, and I was like, guys, let's do Sanguine Depths, like, they would kill me with hammers. I would not be able to sell that to anybody in any group that I did, except for in, like, really high coordinated groups. It's just not, it was a dungeon you would go into, and yeah, it's I think that experience was pretty common among a lot of groups. Like, if you didn't have a good healer and a group that, like, knew what the mobs did, knew how the pulls worked, knew how to optimize the lanterns, you would go in there and you would just get, like, You would get brick walled in the trash after the first boss. You'd get brick walled on the trash before the first boss. You would realize your healer was like 3 key levels out of their depths on the third boss, and you would just be, you would be up against a checkmate situation. It was not winnable, and that I think experience was so common in Sanguine Depths. And I agree though that like, if you're pushing title in that place, you're pushing rank 1 keys, you're doing MDI in there, it has some of the best, but I would describe it like a raid boss that only had a mythic difficulty. Like, you couldn't go in there and do it on lower difficulties. It just didn't work. It was fundamentally always amped up at full power, and that made it pretty inaccessible.
Yeah, it was basically like our Shrine of the Storm picks.
Yeah,
me and Max,
it is
it's not
Shadowlands
something
Shrine of
that
the Storm.
feels like-
That's all it is.
Yeah, I've always said it
Yeah.
before. People are not gonna like Sanguine Depths, but if you actually played it in an organized group and you knew what you were doing, it banged hard.
All
The
right.
one thing I'll say that I think is different between Shrine and Sanguine, I think it's a little unfair that I didn't put Shrine on my list for personal fun, but I think the difficulty in Shrine was a lot less intuitive and a lot more like you would have to do wild skips or like wild kick and CC rotations, but I don't really think that there was much of that in Sanguine Depths. Like, Sanguine Depths was just difficult in terms of you took a lot of damage, you needed to deal a lot of damage, you needed to survive. And I think the difficulty, while they would be like equal in terms of you want to be in a really good group to do them, I think the difficulty was just way more fun in Sanguine Depths than in Shrine. But I mean, I also did have a lot of fun in Shrine. I feel bad for not having that on my list.
All right, so Sanguine Depths has been etched in stone with some great arguments, and now we are going to go back-to-back fucking wild takes with Dorky's number 1, if I'm...
Okay, so yeah, nobody has this because it's the last one. It's, you know what? Take a guess first. Can you guys take a quick guess?
You already told us what it
It's
is.
the Motherload, man. It's the Motherload.
Oh, right, yeah, I already told. Oh, okay, yeah, it's the load. Holy, Motherload is so sick. Now, I don't think Motherload was like as well designed as like say Underrot or like as cool as Sanguine Depths, but Motherload was so much fun. I enjoyed Motherload a lot when it was out at the time. And keep in mind, this was with like dog shit affixes too. Motherload was heavily infested by, no pun intended, but infested by affixes. There were affixes like bolstering that would just make the mechs massive. You would have like Sanguine, it would just like heal all the mobs, etc. But there was just like so much flavor in the dungeon. There was so much variety. There were so many different mobs. The bosses were all fine. I enjoyed how much trash there was in the dungeon. It basically felt like Freehold kind of, but with more flavor. You know how like I talked about how Freehold was kind of just like vanilla, it's kind of bland. Motherload is like kind of that, except enhanced. It's like fucking vanilla on crack. There's more shit happening, and there are like a bunch of different types of mobs. And I swear, if they brought back Motherload, it would be an extremely good dungeon, just because of like how dungeons are nowadays and how affixes are nowadays.
I'm surprised I didn't put Motherload on my list or consider it more. This was one very similar reasons to Shrine, where this was an MDI darling. If you did Motherload, you were having a really good time. In fact, our group was like the first group to our like really early season, really early BFA MDI group. Sang actually figured out a way to pull all of the, like activate all of the mechs all at once as soon as the dungeon started, by like doing that like pre-pull thing. And then like it failed in our route, but then like the next time the MDI came around, it was like, if you guys remember those Motherload runs, like it all involved that tech. And doing that, having him figure that out was like, we felt like we had done something really cool. It lost points for me because like some of the trash in different areas was like stuff you were never, ever gonna pull. But I did, like, if you think about it, like 70% of your mob count ish is entirely in that first area, and it's kind of like one big Underrot second room, isn't it?
Well, so I
Which
think
is great.
a large reason for that is like people just didn't necessarily know the dungeon too well, so people just like, kind of did whatever was in the beginning because they were familiar with it. But it was definitely not true later on. Like as people got, that's also another huge plus for me. Is like as people got better and better at the dungeon, or people started to figure out the dungeon more and more, people started playing all the areas. Like towards the end of the season, towards the end of the expansion, people were playing all the mobs at the end because like people realized like, oh, the giant robots actually spawn bombs that give you counts, so they turned out to be extremely worth it. And most of the trash felt fair. The only thing that felt kind of bad was the trash by the third boss area with the alchemist and the, I don't know what else was there, like scientists or whatever.
What about that
Shout out
boss?
Grease Gun as well for
Yeah,
being like
Grease
an
Gun-
egregiously bad.
Remember
mechanic,
when
but-
you pulled those little guys at the beginning and they would all wrench through you right away, and like as a tank, like you just got absolutely clapped. Like,
Well, I mean, that's also
That
what
was
I
fine,
loved
I
about it,
think,
because
but
like
the
there was like
Grease
so
Gun-
much ways you can game it.
yeah,
Grease Gun was
Gun-
horrifying. The
Grease
mob
Gun
would be
was horrifying
stunned,
too,
and it would just
but-
be a gun would appear in his hand, and your tank would die.
Yeah,
Or, like your
well,
not your
no,
tank, your
but
random
like
person
what
would
made
die.
it great was that like you could have done the dungeon in so many different ways. Like part of what we did to counteract the grease gun was just put them all into max. So it was actually really cool.
That
how they
was
could,
cool.
like-
I
Yeah,
liked
that was
that
sick.
option, dude. If you ever did any of those dungeons as well, where you would like, I remember we were playing with like a disc priest that season, and we would like shining
Knock 'em in.
force one,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah.
it would then be nearer to a different mech to run and pilot it. That was so cool.
Yeah, like there was actually so many cool things you could
and
do.
and then it was also a really cool spell reflect dungeon. Like the
Yeah.
and maybe that's also a criticism. Like the tanking that third boss. Was it the third boss? The
Yeah.
second to last boss?
Brixa.
Yeah, like
Brixa
tanking
Flux
that
Flame.
boss without like diffuse magic or spell reflect was absolutely hellish. Like that dot hit so hard.
Nah, that was just a get good situation.
We had a bear.
That was a set your Hearthstone
we
to
had
the
a bear.
Hosen Throne. You would set your Hearthstone to the inn right outside of that place, and you would hearth before the third boss, and you would talent all your magic DR stuff.
Yeah,
or
like
or
more
in
pain thing.
yeah that or in season 4 you would just have a verse set for that boss specifically and be a lot or maybe you had it all the time, but or lucid dreams. Yeah, that was crazy. The what was it? I also think it was a good affix dungeon. Like it had a really good interaction with Awakened. Like doing
100%.
doing different Awakened stuff. In the MDI, kiting it was like one thing, but like you had the ability, you could pull that trash at the end with the last boss. You could do like Awaken was a really cool thing. It was a really good reaping dungeon, right? So I think that added stuff to it as well.
Yeah, I love Overload.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I didn't have it on my list, and a lot of us didn't have it or have it high because of how it was when it was, and the fact that affixes were so much more oppressive.
Oh, what a
back
good
then.
point.
Dude,
The thing
What a
is,
good
bolstering,
point.
sanguine, teaming. Do you guys remember teaming before they removed it in that place?
Bolstering, like sanguine lasting a full minute with the mechs that would pause. But I'm very confident that if this dungeon came, or I'm gonna
I know what you're
take
gonna say.
Scopium here.
You're right.
When this dungeon comes back, that it's going to be an absolute banger unless they ruin it, because this dungeon without all of the annoying affix interactions,
You're 100%
is
right.
Gonna be.
You're
it's gonna bang.
100% right.
So
This-
I
yeah.
didn't put it in my top 10 because of the affixes. If you took away affixes and just the dungeon design, yeah, this Motherlord owns.
That actually makes me feel bad that I didn't put it on my list because I just didn't think about that. But you are so right that if they brought this back, it would go up on everyone's list except for Dorkies, of course. And it would exist on all of our lists because what made this dungeon so bad specifically was affixes that no longer exist or are heavily nerfed. So you're completely right. Fuck, I should have thought of that. Okay, we are on
Yeah, I showed a lot
Dratnos'.
of that too.
What'd you say, Dork?
Okay, what's next?
Yeah.
We
so my
have-
number one is King's Rest.
Let's go.
No, it's Gambit.
Yeah, we could do some honorable mentions after this, but yeah. So Dratnos and I both have Gambit. Everyone has Gambit in their top 3, which I think is I actually made a little, hilarious. Someone in my chat assigned a point value to everything we posted. I think Gambit ended up number 1 by about 10. So, I mean, I don't really have a lot to say from this other than this is by far the most fun I've ever had in a dungeon. I didn't play it in the TGP or MDI, whatever it was that season. I also think Gambit is going to maybe trend a little higher. And it has nothing to do with Gambit, and it has to be that the only 2 seasons this ever existed were 2 of the very best seasonals to ever exist, and in my opinion, by far the best one, and Encrypted. So, just in general, we were talking earlier about like how certain dungeons would maybe feel better or worse depending on like the seasonals that you played when they were there, and like this one benefits from that a lot. But I don't know, man. The boss is owned. The first boss is sick. The last boss is like one of the coolest end bosses in all of dungeons. The pulls felt At the beginning, one big giant underwrought second room, but the pulls were fucking huge. Like they were just talk about wanting big pulls. The first part of Gambit is like the best shit ever for that. The first boss had like a gimmick that was actually somewhat fun and not annoying to do. I just don't think this dungeon has any flaws. I enjoyed every part of it, and I would, if every dungeon in a season was as good as Gambit, I would just like drop everything and just be a Mythic Plus main. Like it was that good. That's my only take.
Holy Mythic Plus main. Yeah. Gambit is actually such a well-designed dungeon. I mean, the beginning is like super minimal on the cognitive overload. You could literally pull massive, and at most you have to deal with like, okay, maybe there's like a fish stick or two, and there's like a bolt that you'll occasionally need to kick or stop, and like that's about it, right? Like I actually don't even remember what else you had to like necessarily worry about. I guess like pulling the giants. I will say like some of the weak points, not to take anything away from Gambit, is mobs that run away are complete trash. You should never have mobs run away. That's such a classic mechanic. The second thing is like the first boss could have been a little bit better with how it phases. If it was like percent based instead of timer based. But aside from that, like the rest of the dungeon was like almost perfect. I really loved the dragon boss. It was a dragon with a captain hat, and it was an actual tank boss. It's very rare to have a boss where the tank has like
Yeah,
very
like staying
large-
alive and doing the mechanics were both tank jobs on that fight. It was cool.
Yeah. It was like a unique tank job that you had to be super aware of. And also the last boss I thought was really cool. The fact that the last boss can be a 5 to 7 minute long boss while being interesting the entire time is like such a win, because it was basically two separate different bosses, the first phase and the second phase.
One thing I want to say, maybe this is a little bit cheesy. That dungeon brought to me the new era of Mythic Plus of bringing back older dungeons. And I thought it was really, really cool that season, doing like the first area is Legion, the second area is BFA, the third area is like Shadowlands. And it was like, it's hard to call it a theme, but I thought it was really cool to be like, I don't know, just when I did that dungeon and I felt Freehold again, and you know, you have like the Legion stuff, and it's sort of like brought, okay, now we're gonna just mix everything together, and this is how it's gonna be from now on. And I feel like Gambit was like the weird, maybe even unintentional leader of that movement for M+, and I feel like the dungeon pool has gotten a lot better since they started doing that.
Yeah, Gambit was so good.
All right, so it's officially that time.
I think the bosses weren't that good. I think
Really?
like, I don't think the 3 Gambit bosses would be in like the top 3 or the top like whatever of any list for me. That's like
Yeah,
the
'cause you're
only
a
thing that
healer.
I dislike.
What about last boss?
The last boss was sick,
a good
right?
boss.
I think the last boss is the only
the last
time.
boss
Like
just
last
felt like
boss.
the last boss just kind of felt like it really, really dragged on. Like I think it was just too long. Maybe I'm just stung by tyrannical or whatever, but I think the second boss is like always just a huge mess, and it just felt like you just hope your tank. Like I bet tanks probably like that boss, but everyone else is just like, it's one of the. It's like, you know, the bosses where you just sit there and then you hope your healer doesn't suck. That's basically what the second boss is with tanks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the nice thing about the second boss though is like there's a lot of group effort, assuming the team actually tries to do things.
We're just gonna stand here in DPS and you have to do everything.
Yeah. I mean, well, it didn't really work if you do it like that, but it was a pretty interactive boss for sure.
All right, I'm putting up a poll in chat. I want you guys to take a second and look at everyone's list. I want you guys to vote with which list you most agree with. Like, take a second, look at it, look at every single rank, and let's see who has the word of the people here. I'm very interested in this. I actually think Dorky, I mean, like, I feel like Dorky would have a lot of the popular vote because he's, like, the most popular, like, just pure Mythic Plusman, and a lot of them are probably
I had
watching
some
this.
hot takes.
Yeah,
so
but
it's
you,
hard to
like,
say.
Sanguine Depths at the top, I think, would, like, have some people not agree as much. I'm, like, looking... Oh, Dratnos is winning by a fucking landslide right now.
Man of the people. Dratnos for president.
Growl's
Bro, it's
somewhat
Streets
close.
at number 3.
That's right. Streets ahead.
That's right.
Yeah, Dratnos is done. Well, I'm trying to look at Dratnos again. Yeah, Dratnos doesn't have anything that also is, like, directly assailing a lot of of like the majority of Mythic Plus players too. Because I imagine that this stream right now is more high Mythic Plus coded because like they care about this stuff a lot more. But like everyone interacts with Mythic Plus in some way.
Yeah, I think it's just because like Dranos is more of like, you know, spam whatever keys with your friends, and or if you're just pugging, and that's probably what the experience of most players like.
Trying to see what's different because I was the lowest by a mile and then Dranos was the highest. I wonder what about my list and Dranos's, which are pretty similar, was the most offensive to people. Probably the Shrine and Fall edition. Those are like the two main oh, and lower Kara top 3. Yeah, lower Kara top 3, Shrine and Fall. Dude, Kara, yeah, people, that is true. People hated Kara in that season. Like, it was unpopular as fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, my list and your list are like spicy ones.
I think Growl's is weird. The top, like, Sanguine is spicy, but I think outside of Sanguine, his is not spicy at all. I think his is actually, like, I think Sanguine Depths is probably the only reason Growl didn't win, actually. I think if Sanguine wasn't there...
Probably lower Kara too, and...
yeah, but it was
Putting
low,
Kara
though.
in the 7th place, though, is
yeah,
like
most
not gonna attract as much
things,
eyes.
yeah,
I
like
mean, but it shouldn't be top 10.
most
I feel like.
spicy takes from 6 to 10 are gonna weigh a lot less on people's minds, I think, than having them near the top. All right, hell yeah.
We should run this back with the worst.
Yeah, I was about to say
Maybe
worst
5 and
would be.
10.
We could do that next weekend. Where like yeah,
Yeah.
you wouldn't do 10, but probably like top 5 worst would definitely be
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, so
like that'd be
now
pretty easy.
we have an
It'd
interesting
be good. We can
task.
talk about Sanguine Depths again.
Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna have Hirumaredx, someone with I think very different opinions than us. He actually, the reason we did this today is he actually made a video
Jesus.
called the Top 10 Mythic Plus Dungeons. We're not going to actually watch and listen to the reasoning of every single one because some will be obvious and that will just take forever. But we are gonna go through and see what his top 10 were and see who got the most close to him as like a secondary little fun thing to look at. I was gonna do a watch together thing, but I don't think we're actually gonna watch a lot of the video. Really, I don't. Now that we've talked about these a million times, so what I'm gonna do is share my screen to you guys in Discord, and I'm just gonna watch it on my stream and just like go over the ones and see where he comes to the conclusion here.
Okay.
Tell me if you guys can see my thing and it's not lagging. You would have no way to tell if it's not lagging right now because I'm not moving anything, but here we go. All right, move the thing over. You guys see the video?
Yeah.
I have to be really careful not to spoil myself here. He like usually does timestamps with the dungeons so you can accidentally like see them. All right. First of all, before we look at this, is there any one from our list that you guys are pretty sure is going to be like not on there at all, or do you think he's going to have any picks that none of us have?
This is the list that I had.
Oh, so this was
because you had proposed. You don't have to go over it right now.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
This is what I had.
okay.
I didn't put it in any sort of order. I basically just appended on the dungeons on top that I think that he will have that I won't have, and then removed mine. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So, like,
I'm putting it on
yeah,
stream
yeah.
right now.
Okay, so
Okay.
I kind
basically,
of similar too.
fall and above is the dungeons that I think he'll like, and then the bottom 5 I had on my list, and then I think he'll also have. And my POV is
Ooh, I
that
like
he's
this.
a Disc Priest. He's a guy who pugs Disc Priest.
Okay.
Yeah, like he's 100% Quarter Star is going to be in there, and Junkyard would very likely be in there.
And so what this is when he talks about one, whether we agree or disagree with it, we'll just discuss it, which is why I also want to do honorable mentions at the very, very end of this, because I didn't want to do an honorable mention before we watched his video, because we might have ended up talking about them anyway, you know? So, okay, here we go. So, yeah, one, you having Ma in there I think is good. I think Court of Stars he's definitely going to do. People loved that, like,
Yeah.
what was that city called? That aesthetic. In
Suramar.
Suramar. Yeah, people just
Suramar
love the
was the best
Suramar
city they ever
aesthetic,
made.
yeah. Okay,
It's not,
All
I mean,
right.
not even aesthetic. It was just straight up the best.
all right, let's see where we are here. Starting it up.
Overhauling their design and how Blizzard approaches
All
them
right,
in the
pulling
form
up to
of
the
Mythic.
first one.
And
All
at
right, he
number
has
10,
the under.
we have the
Ooh,
Underrot from
all the
Battle
way
for
at
Azeroth
10.
in Season 2 of Dragonflight.
Was that? Did any of us
Okay.
have Underrot that?
Wait, we were close, kind of.
Underrot was on everyone's list, but it was like, yeah, I guess
was higher.
you having it
Yeah.
7. Okay, so that's pretty. Okay,
The
so number
Underrot is
10.
located in
We already talked about
Alzheimer's
Underrot. Let's look at number
Alzheimer's, where it
9.
was only
Moment of
earned
truth
in the
here.
10 spot
Next
on
5
lists.
seconds.
But with a skilled group, it becomes one of the easiest dungeons to ever be part of in a seasonal rotation. And at number 9, we have Waycrest Manor from
Okay.
BFA in Season 3
Pretty-
of Dragonflight. Waycrest Manor is
Waycrest,
a multi-level
pretty,
instant with 5 total bosses throughout its run. It is the sister house of the Proudmoore family cult Taras, and
Pretty
has
close to
since seen its share of
Dratnos.
deceit and witchcraft throughout its
I had it
existence
way
in recent
higher. Was
years
Waycrest
through
on
the
every list?
Heartsbane
Oh no,
Company.
Dorky didn't
The
have it,
overall
right? Yeah, yeah.
aesthetic of the house and even its
Why did you have it off
exterior is
again?
of gothic nature and insidiously crafted horrors.
In like a
Oh,
short.
that's something along
NPCs
the
have been
lines of,
regarded
like,
to
oh, yeah,
legitimately
you
be
gotta
some of the
give
creepiest existing mobs in the game.
I was saying how
Players have loved to venture into the instance
the
just
tree
to be
boss
able to
ruined
hear
it
the music
big
and
time.
see
Oh
the
yeah,
words
yeah,
more.
yeah.
The
Totally remember.
instance is also
All right,
known
going
for
to
its
8.
event.
Nothing
Every
spicy yet.
player
Usually
has
there's some
rewards and
spicy shit.
events on this list,
Here's
but
number
are
8.
shined by our other entries to come, unfortunately. And at number 8, we have Neltharius.
Whoa. Wow.
Okay, that's a spicy one.
That is a fucking take.
No Forest?
Of all
Wait, what do you have this
time?
at? 8?
I actually
That's
don't think this
crazy.
dungeon's that bad. To
Okay,
be
but
fair,
top
I didn't
8?
play season 2, so maybe this is
All right,
like,
but could you put
Yeah.
this in top 8?
I mean,
No.
it is certainly the best argument for
Yeah,
this dungeon
absolutely
not being
not.
bad is if you didn't play the season it was in.
I bet my thought here is if you look at my list, I didn't include anything but fall, and so I think he just put this in to have another Dragonflight dungeon in, and he's like,
No
yeah, this is my
shot.
second
All right,
favorite.
all right,
I mean,
that's
he's trying to
fine.
get into his mindset.
Curious.
Maybe. Okay, go ahead and unmute my stream if you're watching it, and I'm just gonna let him give his take for like a minute or two, just to try to understand this.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Okay.
Season 2 of Dragonflight. Neltharius is the home of the Black Dragon's hoard of gold and mystical treasures. It lies beneath the seat of the former Black Dragon aspect, Neltharion, and has since been taken over by the Jaredins, sworn enemies of the dragons. It is similar to most Mythic Plus dungeons to exist in WoW, and it's just the standard fashion. You have challenging trash packs and harder bosses throughout the instance, and you'll handle them accordingly with your group. What makes this dungeon stand out from the rest, however, is the inclusion of profession items, and more importantly, the burning chain mechanic found throughout the dungeon.
There's no
When
way
it comes
he's going
the
to use the
professions,
chain as a
cooking and
positive
blacksmithing
thing,
are what
right?
really shine greatly here. For players with cooking, you may retrieve the Kalashi
He's an
Goulash
enjoyer.
and receive an extra action button that increases your movement speed,
The quarter stars
allowing
is gonna be
quicker
number
movement
one
throughout
then.
the already massive instance during downtime.
dude.
For blacksmithing, once you defeat Forge Master Gorek, you may retrieve the Blazing Aegis upon his anvil, and when used, it will throw it at your target and deal heavy damage to everything around it. These
Wow,
additions
that
are
chest.
certainly helpful, but
This
what
is
really makes this
insane.
dungeon stand out are the unique routes revolving around the burning chain.
Okay, I want to pause for 1 second. If you were to ask me at the beginning of this expansion, before Mythic Plus ever existed, or we had never done any of these on Mythic Plus, and you were to ask me which one of these dungeons this expansion would be the best Mythic Plus dungeon, I would have said Algothar, and then I would have said Nelthris. Like, I think the vibe was sick. I think the bosses were sick. And I didn't really think
I
the
agree.
chain would be as... So, like, I feel like this is he did the Dragonflight dungeons at the beginning of the expansion take, and then he just didn't do it in Mythic Plus ever and assumed how it would have went. That's my...
He's a
That's
dis-
I also remember Nefaris being pretty cool when I did it during like alpha or beta or whatever it was.
I think the chains now
I'll
are
give
also
that
in a
much.
good place. Like they've found a way to make them much.
Is that
less...
true? I haven't done the season
Yeah.
at all.
I mean,
They-
it's just like the dungeon sucks though, like regardless of the chains.
Like, I'm looking at this now. Like, his footage that he's showing is on normal, right?
environment.
Like, I'm just
You
trying
may
to
have
skip through
noticed
this.
throughout
Like,
your journey routes where you just pull dead.
He
This
doesn't have a
strategy couldn't be
single-
used on- and were very much required when reaching above
I'm telling
the
you,
15
he just
plus
wanted
range
to add
of
a dungeon.
keystones.
Look,
You
he's
could've-
playing Disc Priest. He did not get invited to any key in season 2 because he wasn't a holy paladin.
Wait, why is he playing with like multiple paladins here? What's going on?
this is like a
this is
Mythic
the-
Zero. This is like a...
Because this is the only run he could get invited
Exactly,
to,
that's
'cause
the-
he's not a
yeah.
holy paladin.
Okay, all right, going to 7. Well, it should be right after this. Number 7. Yo, let's go!
Yeah.
Let's go!
God damn it!
I had
Paul.
it. Let's go. But unfortunately, that actually looks bad because I wasn't trying to emulate his list. I was just being 100% serious. I'm interested in what...
Flight and players must journey with
He
both
says is good.
Dormu and Chromie to stop
this
the infinite
Dorky's old
dragonflight from
UI?
changing time as we know it. This eventually leads players to the point in
Or like the
time where
middle part?
Galakrond
It
looks like now
just
UI.
died, and we witness
Oh,
how
maybe. I
massive
remember
he
that
truly
being
was,
my blood DK
and what
UI,
a
but maybe it
terrifying
wasn't.
foe he truly was. So, thankfully, he's already dead. Seeing a return to the infinite dragonflight is always a treat, and players are treated to some of the best designed boss encounters WoW has to
Okay,
offer in this
that trash room sucked, right? Like, what? How do you, or maybe not? Like, I just feel like the whole dragon thing was super weird. Just because like the chunks didn't matter, so you're basically just killing like 3 single target huge dragons. I didn't think that was very good.
I'm
always
just
a treat.
surprised he has,
and
like,
players
2
are treated to some of the
dragonflights here.
best designed boss
Oh, shit,
encounters
double
WoW has
dragon?
to offer in this instance. The most
here we
notable
go.
of the 4 bosses are the Manifested Timeways and Iridocron. the Earthen
Wait,
Incarnate
he's
himself.
using Iridicron
Once
as an
reaching
example
the
of it being
timely
good. I feel like
boss, using
Iridicron.
rotating cones
Iridicron
around
was
the boss
great
and
in
standing
like
a lighter
if
version
it was the
will
hard,
grant
if you were
haste
doing
and
a
cause
dungeon
mechanics
where
to
it wasn't
faster and
super
damage
challenging for your
quicker.
gear,
Standing in the
like
darker
Iridicron, it was
version
sort of like
will not
Prideful
give you this
where
haste buff, but
it was like
also
a
tick
actually
for less
really
damage and the
hard
mechanics appear
challenge
much
among
slower.
a not
The
as hard
boss very
rest of the
quickly is
dungeon.
understood to
Yeah.
encourage risky gameplay and
I felt like it was
reward
just
for more
boring.
damage at the cost of
He
taking
just
more
ran through the
damage and
orbs.
mechanics. It also
Yeah.
allows the
Is that what
player
tanks
to
do
play
on this
safer
fight?
and just
Yeah,
stay within
they
the
do
darker
that.
zone throughout the encounter
Man.
the entire time to not actually endanger themselves.
orbs?
By the way, I want to point out just one thing, Galakron's Fall. Guys, I have seen some clips and from my stream like of evokers in my group doing the most unholy things you could imagine with movement involving dodging these orbs, like going hard left, like trying to like backflip through them and stuff, like hovering to the outside of the room and literally running. I've seen an evoker get pushed away from the boss because of this, and instead of running around it, running all the way to the stairs where you came into this zone. Fucking
Once you
insane
defeat this
shit.
encounter, you'll be prompted to follow Chromie to the past and quite literally rewrite a part of history
Okay,
with
so we
it.
move on from
You will
here.
bear witness
So
to
he
the
chose
corpse of the
Fall.
Great
Let's go to number 6. I have a feeling he's going to have like an
It's
insanely
the type that you see
spicy one.
across many other mythical
Here we go.
dungeons already. And at number 6, we have the Necrotic Wake from seasons
Okay.
1 to 3 of
I-
Okay, I'm starting to see a
No
theme.
way. No
I'm seeing a
way.
theme.
We found
What's
that
the
it's being
theme?
plundered.
Professions?
Well, the theme is
Like
like
gimmicks.
profession items and or just like things that kill the dungeon for you. Like that's a theme.
Yeah,
right?
it's like a way to make a dungeon different from another dungeon. Is
Yeah, like
Like-
uniqueness.
oh, this has this that these other dungeons don't have, but that this is always.
So
this
surely
thing
he'll
kills
have
the dungeon
Sanguine
for
Blade.
me.
He is in a Mythic Plus version of the key in this footage, though. We do have points for that.
Look at his UI.
He's gonna put Junkyard.
You think he's gonna put Junkyard? Yeah, we don't. Does anyone have any takes about Wake? I think Wake is just like a.
I don't like
So
this dungeon.
I think it's possible to make it a lot better when it comes back with doing basically the Neltharius Chains treatment to the weapons and the anima golems. And also, I think these Ulramus Gatekeeper mobs at the start of the dungeon, if those were like nerfed by a lot, this dungeon would be a lot less offensive at the start too.
Well, also, in general, I really like this first room. Like I
Yeah.
enjoyed the trash pulls here. Maybe
Except for the gatekeepers.
Yeah, you have to like tiptoe around the gatekeepers because they're
Yeah.
not reasonable mobs.
it felt like
Items were just way too powerful too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, he's in a pug and he's trying to show the spear, but no one uses it, so he's just pointing to it sitting on the ground.
Oh no! The shaman got it. The shaman got
Yeah,
it.
Shaman got it. And then he spends time on that. I also think I thought the second boss in here was pretty cool. I don't know how I feel about the trash before the surgeon though. I feel like that was like it being what's the word, like kind of gated behind that felt kind of weird to me.
Yeah. Dude, you get up
This
into the
whole
Necropolis and you have
Necropolis
to kill
sucks.
like 4 trash packs, and then you start a 3 trash pack one at a time gauntlet. Ooh.
I'm also gonna add some
last two
points.
bosses were
I'm gonna
terrible,
add
too.
some points for the MSBT Porky here on his UI. And if you run default MSBT and you keep the Porky text, that goes incredibly hard. All right, number 5, Halls of Atonement, which is that's a
I
fair.
can
That's
get behind this.
fair beans. I think everyone here, or 2 of you, had it on the list. It was a 9 and a 10, so like just barely made a couple of the lists, but having it top 5 is so. I think this is going to speak more to the community, because I know people in chat. I was like kind of just looking at chat the whole time, and there was definitely a lot of people like, how do more people not have Hall of Atonement? How is Halls of Atonement not higher on the list? So I think Halls of Atonement is a pretty community-wide, like publicly approved.
It was solid.
dungeon.
Yeah, nice chill halls.
Yeah. Big polls. Yeah. Okay. We talked about halls already though, so we'll skip ahead. All right, moment of truth. Oh, dude, Growl, you were so right.
Oh yeah.
You got it.
We
You-
knew Court was gonna be up here.
I mean,
yeah.
Court of Stars was like an obvious one. I'd be surprised if he didn't put it.
Hey man, if Court of Stars never came back this expansion, it would have been top 5 for me. I don't know what that says about me, but that's true.
Amen.
All right, so okay, so here's where Court loses some value for me. I hate how the last part of the dungeon seems like it gives you choice, but it actually doesn't. And there's actually a couple of things like this in the next expansion that I hope they make work like this on Mythic. But when you have those little mini bosses, I think it's super boring that you just have to spawn all 4 mini bosses and then just do the boss. I think it should be exactly like Awakened. I think those bosses shouldn't make the boss do 100% more damage and have 100% more health or whatever is ridiculous like that, or you should have to kite them. I think like the boss should have mechanics tied to those mini bosses, and you should choose how many mechanics you can deal with on the boss to choose to speed up your dungeon or to get rid of them ahead of time. I think that would be fucking sweet, and I think that was a huge missed opportunity in court. Do you guys agree with that, by the way? Or do you wish?
I still don't think they're gonna do that, but I know like we've talked about some policy, but I swear there's no shot they're gonna make them optional.
I mean, why? I mean, it's the whole spirit of Awakened, right? I mean, you could definitely do it. I don't know. All right, he spent a lot of time talking about core. Also, you did mention something earlier, like the whole like things, clicking on things in the dungeon to do things for you is a heavy theme in his list. Like, they're like I think he's almost gonna pick every single one of them.
Yeah.
All right, so let's.
I'll come to his defense here for a second, though. I think that's a theme for Blizzard. I think they have tons of stuff like this in every dungeon, and he's simply just including it because that's what like you want to talk about in like an average video like this.
Maybe it's
like,
a theme for Blizzard because a lot of players actually do like
exactly
it.
what Dranos is saying.
Despair.
Like I think it's just like I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal or whatever.
Well,
like I think it's cool, but it's like that's what makes the dungeons different. So that's what he has to talk.
Well,
about,
it's because the majority of players don't do these dungeons hundreds of times in Mythic Plus. They do them like when you're leveling, and then like maybe a couple times throughout the expansion. And every time you're in the dungeon, it's like, oh, this is cool flair that my class can do something that others can't. But they don't run into the friction of feeling like it's required or anything like that, just because of the level of content they're doing. And that's probably applicable to more players that play WoW than people like us, right? So that's probably.
I think
yeah.
The biggest thing would be people who spam certain dungeons a lot, because like I feel like a lot of players, they kind of do the whole, all right, like Core of Stars drops my specific trinket, right? So I'm just gonna run Core of Stars 500 times until I finally get my trinket, or if it's like the other side to get my scales.
All right, I don't think we're gonna see anything spicy. What do you guys guess his top 3 is before we get into them? Like, I'm guessing Freehold. I'm guessing. Gambit. Do you think he's gonna put Gambit?
I still think he's gonna put Junkyard. I think Junkyard's gonna be in there.
Junkyard.
I know him. He has Junkyard.
Junkyard, maybe Mist.
Maybe a Talbazar.
He hasn't done Maw of Souls either.
Has he done any Legion? Yeah, he does Court, obviously. Well, Court got brought back. Has he done any other Legion? No. So except for stuff that's been brought back. My guess for his top 3 is Freehold, Mists, and Maw of Souls in any order. Does anyone have any other major crazy takes? Oh wait,
I'm gonna say Junkyard.
Okay, this is kind of a spoiler, but I remember in he had a previous video talking about Mythic Plus, and he's a big Toldagor fan. That would be fucking wild.
There's no way. There's no way.
He has said it before. Sick. It would make this reaction fucking hilarious.
I mean, it makes sense though, because like he likes like.
Oh, he likes the items in the
forest.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Number three. Here we go.
Yep.
You called it. You actually fucking called it. I wonder if you're gonna get the other dude. Growl might call his top 5 based on what he thought he was gonna put. That's insane. So Junkyard, I think. If I'm going to give Junkyard any credit, you do big pulls. You can kind of move it around a little bit. And maybe people over-criticize it because of how much of the damage in the key is being done by items that aren't you. But it's not in like a super annoying way. Like, I don't know, if you did a dungeon and if you did the dungeon and just didn't have your details open or whatever, you would kind of just mean things died faster, but it doesn't seem like too super out of the ordinary, like unless you compare it to other keys at a relative key level.
Right. Well, but I think that's like a benefit for a lot of people. Like if you have one key that you're rolling into a random +10 key and Junkyard is half as difficult as all the other ones, like for us that's annoying and bad or whatever, and you get to high keys and it's like, oh, this is way easier than all the others. But for the average person, if it's like, oh, you can have, like, when this one shows up, you go there and you win. When the other ones show up, you go there and you lose. I think it's natural that there's going to be a lot of pressure to actually, like, that's going to make you like the one that you go and win at.
Yeah, what Drano said about Sanguine was wild. What he said about Sanguine, why he didn't like my pick, the fact that, like,
yeah,
okay, you play with your buddies, you do, like, I feel like that's that so encapsulates the most people's experience with dungeons. You get your guildies or your buddies or your pug or whatever. You do slash keys. You see what you have, and then what's the dungeon that you pick. And I feel like now if you look at his list like that, like he's gonna you pick Junkyard, like you pick Quarter Stars. And I think even like in season 2, like I bet that's part of what he was thinking is like, oh, you pick Niltharis, like that's the key that you do. And then I bet we see.
Let's let him defend it. I'm just gonna let this play.
I want to hear it too.
Yeah, I'm gonna let this play unmuted for like a minute or so.
And Shadowlands Season 4. Mechagon is an old island inhabited by mechanomes that seek to revert the curse of flesh in all living creatures. It is up to players to thwart these efforts, as mechanization more than often leads to death, and their ruler, King Mechagon, has long but gone mad in his efforts. Mechagon was separated into 2 dungeons during its journey. The first half was Junkyard and the second Workshop. Both are equally enjoyed, but Junkyard had the special flavor of little robots that patrolled around specific areas of the dungeon. If you walked up to these bots and clicked them, they'll give you a buff based on which you clicked.
He's a
there
big
were
fan.
3 buffs in total.
Oh yeah.
Greased gave you 5% haste and 10% movement speed. Reinforced increased your maximum health and healing received by 10%. Conductive made your attacks occasionally proc a lightning zap on enemies that dealt high damage. These bots, while potentially not appearing like much, were insanely crucial to timing your keys. Dying would remove these buffs, so playing perfect was very key. And these bops helped accelerate that style greatly.
Wouldn't that be a negative,
Conductive
though?
would often be a tanker healer's top damage, and even some quick-hitting DPS like Fury Warriors. It was insanely fun to pull massive groups of trash and AoE them down like crazy with your groups, and there were tons of class gimmicks that you could use to speed up your runs. One of the more niche uses was a Druid stampeding roar on the Squirt box, make the run towards the Gunker boss quicker. No boss really felt unfair, and if you were a solid player,
tech?
you'd be rewarded
Wait, is that
How do I not know about this?
I don't think that works.
my
Wait,
God.
what the fuck?
You suck, bro.
greatly for your efforts and farm the loot within like crazy. Mechagon also
Dude, how does he know the tech?
had the
Hold
bit
on, wait.
band
Did
runes,
Druids have?
which were
Wait, did Druids have roar? Only bear, right? In
Yeah, it has
feral?
to be a bear or feral, yeah.
Wait, that was your tech that you needed to know. You were the bear.
I mean, it was useless because you would just fight shit while you're doing RP anyways.
Oh my god. Well, you didn't have
Embarrassing.
access to fighting it faster because you didn't.
Yep, insane.
a very powerful tier set like
Okay, what did you guys think about the last boss? I think the last boss was actually pretty good. At least in Awakened,
alright.
fighting the Awakened mobs and like killing them with the little first guy and then coming back for the burn phase was really enjoyable for me.
That was a fine
It was
boss.
alright.
I thought the
things
maze
that would
was
proc
weird.
off each other. Junkyard being so enjoyed by players benefited farming.
Oh, I
these
like
rings
the
greatly. And you see people
the
going
troll
after
guy,
like
like the
crazy.
first boss
It
you usually
also had
fought
the
too.
Mechagon Peacekeeper mount, allowing collectors an alternative to farm. their
Oh,
mount.
true. The mounts
addition,
and
every
the
week
items
had a
from
different
it were
route,
cool
no matter
too.
what.
That's a
But
good
yeah,
take
ahead
that
of
we
each
didn't
boss,
talk
we
about.
did
That's what I said earlier,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like,
Oh, did you? Yeah.
People like to spam these dungeons to like farm specific stuff, so I think
That's
that's
true.
like
Oh.
Well, but
it's come
a
from.
bad dungeon with a good item made it worse, right? Like soul letting Ruby from
Yeah, right,
Theater of
right.
Pain was a downside.
Yeah. Yeah, like I
Okay.
think that's where most of the opinions come from. Like
You
it's people who
could
just do
attempt
these
the
dungeons a bunch
bosses
of
Boys,
times
on
and-
look at this
but it would
atonement
active
tracker, by
hard
the way.
mode and
You guys
force
see this
dodge
shit over here?
mechanics much more frequently.
The
If you
fucking
wanted to stay
bar?
ride, all you
Earlier.
did
That
was
is
go to a different
crazy.
boss rather than what was currently being patrolled. It was
Imagine
a
that in a
very
raid.
well-designed dungeon
All right,
with we
moving
have
on.
Freehold from all seasons.
Okay, unassailable. We've talked about Freehold a lot. Probably don't even need to hear anything else. All right.
Well, thank God he
Dude,
put
Freehold. Freehold is the great unifier, man. Everybody
yeah,
loves
I'd
it.
be surprised if he didn't have Freehold.
Okay, so the question is,
Well, you have
so
a problem.
if Growl's
Is it
list
gonna be Toldagor?
is correct, is it's going... Well, Toldagor would be insane. That would be a wild...
I mean, hey,
It's like...
he did say he likes it.
Growl's thing thinks it's going to be Maw or Mists, and I could see both of those being chosen here. I mean, is there any
Or
other...
Gambit. He didn't talk about Gambit.
Is
right?
Gambit a... I feel like Gambit is more enjoyed by us than the
Yeah.
entire community for sure.
I think Gambit, like the pug experience, was you'd go to the first part of the dungeon and you'd like wipe to Murlocs pulling some stuff and fish
Yeah,
sticks
okay.
going
Yeah,
off.
probably Mar or Miss.
Maybe
I
it's a
would say.
Taldazar too. That's another one that... Okay, let's
It's
see.
gonna be Toldagor. I'm going
It
Toldagor.
certainly
If it's
earns
Toldagor, you're
mark
gonna hear a
too,
gingy desk
just
slam
for
coming out of
being
my
a
mic.
dungeon that anyone could approach and have fun in, allowing for insane plays and gimmicks overall. And completing our list at number
Dude!
1, we have
Dude, Growl fucking nailed it. He
God
got...
damn it.
Growl got... Okay, he only got 2 of the top 5, or 3 of the top 5 right. Of his like... So Growl, I posted a picture of it beforehand.
To be fair, I didn't even order it on purpose.
Yeah,
but, okay, yeah. I didn't mean to put
Well, your order
yes,
was
I
that's
did.
true.
your
Yes, I
order
did.
your order was wrong anyway.
Yes, I did order it.
Yeah, well, the order was wrong anyway because, well, except for Maw. But, like, he basically, what Growl did was, like, okay, here are the actual good dungeons at the bottom, and I also think he'll pick them, and then the top 5 are ones that I didn't pick, but I think he will pick, and he got 3 of the 5 right? He didn't do Mists, right? Mist wasn't on the... I'm surprised Mist wasn't on the list, actually.
Mist and Gambit were the ones that...
Yeah, okay. I mean, we already talked about Maw. Maw was on one of our lists, but all right.
Wait, what do you say? Let's hear what he has to say.
You want to hear it? Okay.
The Maw of Souls dungeon from Legion. With Legion being the hallmark of Mythic Plus, Blizzard was still attempting to learn how they wanted to approach these dungeons and were trying new methods. Maw of Souls is infamously known for being one of the easiest and quickest Mythic Plus dungeons to date, with only 3 bosses in total, and not very challenging traps.
That's only a take you have if you never do these on a high level, which is why I think that like people who didn't play high level keys in this expansion will only think Maw owns because they didn't realize it was actually one of the hardest dungeons of all
Dude,
of them.
I'm telling you, Vo, it's the shortness. Like, being able to just get in there and get out really quick
Yep.
is such a big deal.
Yeah.
I hope
During
Blizzard
its-
nails that.
Yeah.
Dude, War Within is going to be the golden age.
He is right. Drano, like, I'm serious, Dorky. I would bet right now that the average dungeon length in the War Within is at least 5 minutes shorter than Dragonflight.
5
Do
is
you
a
know
lot.
what
Yeah,
the start of
I agree.
Dragonflight, the average dungeon length was 5 minutes shorter, over 5 minutes shorter than in Shadowlands.
I mean, it's clearly a design goal. I mean, you can even just tell like how many bosses there are in the dungeons. Like if you were to count the 8 dungeons, how many bosses are in them? Actually, someone should do that. Count the amount of bosses in the 8 Dragonflight dungeons versus the 8 War Within dungeons. I bet.
But you also have
like,
to keep in mind, there's a lot of RP and trash. So
yeah, but like that can be
That's why
sped
I'd
up
be
in a Mythic
surprised
Plus
if it's 5
environment.
minutes.
But we haven't even seen like.
no,
the,
I know for sure.
Yeah.
And from Legion, it was hard to go anywhere without seeing people spam running Maw of Souls constantly for its loot and easy grind for artifact power. Artifact power was a massive grind for your artifact weapons that would slowly increase the power of your character over time, granting you new abilities sometimes, or even incredibly strong passive powers.
I miss artifact
This
weapons.
made Maw of Souls the perfect dungeon to run repeatedly because of how fast and
that
efficient you
ACB
could be
right
with
here.
it, even in mid-tier groups. Beginning the dungeon, many groups would typically pull all the trash mobs before them up to the first boss and do an insane cleave
Holy
damage,
shit, he's
and
talking
even
about me.
sometimes commit their heroism or time warp cooldowns for it. While players have enjoyed bigger numbers since it was even a concept.
Dude, shout out Maw of Souls and just Legion Mythic Plus in general. Like how crazy this game used to be. Like even as far back as MoP, but in Legion there was a tank ability that gave your entire party 25% leech on a 45-second cooldown. That's fucking nuts. Like just think about
Legion
that
was sick.
now, dude. I mean, JB would just fucking just vanish into the Shadow Realm if that happened.
So the classic pull everything and do big damage trope is always a favorite. Even thematically, the dungeon just has an aesthetic that players greatly enjoy. When it comes to the first boss of the instance,
Yep, the aesthetic
Wrath-Lichen
owned. The
players
boat-
may
the boat
recognize him
fucking
as
owned.
King Yamarin from Urtkard Pinnacle. Here we find him punished for striking his bargain with the Lich King of old, and he even taunts players for destroying his kingdom and people during the time
Wait,
of
that
reign.
guy's in this dungeon?
Generally, his mechanics are
That's
pretty
right.
simple, involving cleaving a bunch
Wait,
of
what?
anti-summons, running out to avoid a fear, and just healing through pulsing airway damage that he creates. Once defeated, you'll travel to
Oh,
the horn that he
I never
guarded
put
and
that
blow into
together.
it. Soon, boarding your characters atop the very ship that transports the dead to Helheim. You'll find more trash packs and even be given 2 paths to take. One with the undead giant and the Grimwalker, and the other a more challenging trash pack. These paths would change every week, as only one of the doors to lead you up were opened at a time. Creating
Wait,
a
I don't
curve
remember
where
that.
players must become knowledgeable about how to
It was not
approach
in-
both packs at
Actually,
one
was
point.
it in Plus?
Was
You
that
will
in
then
Mythic
approach
Plus?
the deck of the ship and must face Harbear a rumored
I
Constellar.
don't think so.
Constellars
It's
are
just not
powerful
nearly as
abilities that
impactful.
lack
lantern
holes
guy.
recognizable other
Yeah,
than
but
the
it didn't.
Do you remember?
Yeah, it changed the way I remember now. But it wasn't like as impactful as like for the reason you would give Waycrest a detriment for that. It wasn't like it didn't define your entire run.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you
From
skipped
his
it
algorithm.
anyways. There's
You,
no
yeah,
choice,
exactly.
like-
It doesn't matter.
from Old War. During the encounter, you
this
must
boss.
avoid the large swirling pools and fight off ads that must be interrupted, and just in general use CC and lots of cleave damage to bring them down. Up next is more trash.
Okay, the
cleaving down
boat pull
more
is
than a mini
insane.
boss named Scourge, who has an interrupt mechanics and 7th.
Shout out all the people who would like steal all of your guild's fire mages to speed clear Maw of Souls. I know I did this if you were like a tank and just pull the entire boat all in one, and other people couldn't do that. Shout out.
More ads. Finally, you face off against Helia, the ruler of the very domain you're within.
Hell
Here,
yeah.
you must cleave down her tentacles that grasp onto the ship and slowly whittle her health down while avoiding the cracks and breaks in the ship that she causes. Once enough of her tentacles
Yo,
have
is
been
he- this
defeated,
is
you will face
Deplete.
Helia herself and no longer the tentacles, and continue similar mechanics from before.
Nah, dude,
but
tens
now
were
Bro,
bad
he
hard
didn't.
back
He didn't
then.
have a. He didn't have a fucking. He didn't have a VOD of a completo.
With
Those
Okay, but you
34
gotta realize
there's-
tens were harder.
they
This
died.
is the quickest and easiest dungeon he starts off it with, and then by the end he's just 8 minutes.
No.
depleted.
Bro, there's 34 deaths.
We were getting footage. We were getting footage of all the different mechanics.
frontal cone attacks
a
and
footage
higher
run.
damage
Oh,
thresholds.
it's a footage run,
Once
yeah.
defeated, you
Footage
finish
gap.
the dungeon. The Maw of Souls holds a
quaking.
theme of high cleave throughout the entire instance, and players love to make their damage meters shoot up to show off to their friends. While
Oh, this is interesting. He says this dungeon was big AoE pull boss, big AoE pull boss, big AoE pull mini boss boss. I want people to understand he's saying that this made the dungeon fun. This is what every MDI dungeon becomes, and that is why the MDI is fun to do. Outside of the like crazy practice time and stuff like that. But like if you wonder
Well,
why
I mean,
go ahead.
only if you were able to do it easily.
I was gonna say
If you
that
weren't doing it as
describes all
easily,
of them.
that's not so fun.
I just mean like if you wondered why dungeons were on our list higher and you're like, bro, you're fucking crazy. How'd you put that there? It's because the
Oh,
MDI
you mean for us,
makes
yeah,
the
yeah.
dungeons this versus what they normally are, and that makes them more fun.
almost any level player could approach this dungeon and completed even the highest keystone levels because of how simple it really was when it came to all the skill of WoW players for the time. You could be a player who's only on a few times a week and only knows how to cleave everything in front of you and do just fine in the instance. Runs, even for the MDI, could be less than 10 minutes.
Hey, MDI
where
shout out.
dungeons now can be upwards to 30 or more minutes. It was such an
That's so
enjoyable
fucking
dungeon.
true.
Wait, are dungeons actually longer on average now than they were in Legion? Then
No.
like they're not,
No.
right?
Legion had
That it's very-
Archway and Halls at 45-minute timers.
Oh yeah.
Likely to make a return someday in a future season of WoW. The instance was thematically stunning and is one of the most unique approaches to a dungeon in a long time, earning it the top spot on our list. Alright, and that completes our list. Mythic Plus is going to expand constantly, and
This is so interesting. He has B-roll playing at the end while he talks, and he chose to use footage of the Black Morass. That is
That's a mass.
That was on my list of worst dungeons they could make into M+ dungeons.
okay. Yeah, we need to do this again one time with a. Yeah, we could do like a bunch of different ones of these. We could be worst Mythic Plus dungeons ever, probably a shorter list than 10. We could do best dungeons they should bring back to turn into Mythic Plus dungeons, and maybe dungeons to not turn into. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe you could combine some of those. But this was really fun. Before we do anything more, though, are there any honorable mentions of dungeons we have not talked about yet that didn't make any of our lists, was not on his list, that you want to shout out for being a good dungeon? I have a few.
What do we not have?
I have
Black or
one.
Cold.
Do you think?
That's
Wait,
garbage.
you think Black Cold's good?
Well, that was one that had some good parts to it. I think the revamp of it has some
The revamp was better.
concerns, but
Well, the
yeah.
revamp was better, right?
yeah, like the revamp improved some parts of it. I think the first pull of the dungeon, it was better when you could skip it, but I think it makes sense they didn't want you to do that.
What do you guys think about Darkheart Thicket?
I don't think it deserves it.
It was way higher on my list before it came back. It's one of those dungeons where when it came back, I just either had rose tinted glasses about it from Legion or that I have two spicy ones, both from Legion. Starting with Cathedral. I love Cathedral. It almost made my top 10.
Yeah, that's really high on my list of ones they should bring back.
Yep. Cathedral absolutely
Yes.
slams.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
It was pretty sick.
I know people in chat
I think
hate
it was bad at the
Cathedral.
time, but I think it would be one of the ones that has the highest potential if they brought it back.
All right.
Hard to agree. I mean, I feel the same with Seat, honestly.
Same. I feel the exact same about Seat, and I know that if there was going to be a dungeon on our list that would be the least popular one, it would be Seat.
Yeah.
People hate Seat. It was so hard when it came out, but I think something that hurt it more than anything else was it was just that and Cathedral both suffered from Mythic Plus being out, us having done every other dungeon for a year at that point, there being like fucking 15 dungeons, and them being the only two that people didn't know. So yes, they were overtuned and hard, but they seemed so much harder than they were because people, you know, they were just the only ones that people hadn't figured out yet, which added a lot of extra difficulty as well. I don't know. I like Seed a lot.
It was ahead of its time.
Oh, I have one maybe. This one almost made my list, but it was kind of healer bias. Shout out Ruby Life Pools. I think Ruby Life Pools is fun. in
Oh,
its
dude,
current state.
Growl, I wish you were here the other day. We had this conversation. When was it on the podcast?
It was on the Poddy
Poddy C,
C, yeah.
Yeah, it was on the
It'll be a
podcast,
healer
and
episode.
we were, yeah, maybe we should do a healer episode, but we were talking about how, like, what do healers actually want in keys? Because, like, you'll hear takes from healers about how, oh, you know, like there's too much healing going on and I feel like I want to just like be in cat form and do damage, but then like we were wondering whether healers wanted to actually have their healing be challenged as well and like the difficulties with that. And we talked about Ruby being a disliked key because it was so stressful for healing the whole time, but we were wondering, we were thinking people like you would actually like Ruby because it was a healer gap dungeon. It was, you had your skills as a healer were tested. So you enjoyed Ruby then.
I think it just overall had like 3 very, very good boss fights. I think all the boss fights in Ruby are like pretty good. And like the trash pulls, I think between first and second boss, like the elementals are a little wild and pretty coordination heavy, but I think the beginning you're like pulling big, you're nuking stuff. I think the end is like kind of cool too. I think Ruby is, and Ruby's a short dungeon too. I think Ruby came close to making my list. I think it will be fondly remembered, even though like people are kind of like whatever about it now.
Did people hate it when like when it first came out in Dragonflight?
Yeah, just because it was very hard.
That's a good question. How many dungeons that you would otherwise say they were really good because of all the things we've talked about? Theme, cool boss fights, cool trash. But because they were too hard, they were disliked, or they were liked because they were easy. Like how much of a factor that has on.
I mean, that was like a lot of the stuff on our list that people had like they disagreed with our takes, right? Like your lower Kara, my Sanguine, Dorky's Shrine. Like those are that's why everyone liked Dratnos' list, because he didn't have any of those dungeons.
Yeah, Dranos was like
He's a man of the
PG
people.
list.
I was pandering. Yeah.
He was pandering, or he's the most
very
in
friendly
tune with the
list.
community, which I would also probably agree with.
I'm surprised you didn't have Junkyard.
Nah, that place sucks.
I'm surprised
Bro.
either Dorky or Growl didn't sneak Brackenhide on the list.
I had it in like top 15 at least, and I was like thinking about like, do I want to put Bracket in there? And I ultimately decided not really. Because they're just like better dungeons.
I think
Yeah.
Brackenhide is the mobs in between Hackclaw's Warband and Gutshot away from being an all-timer great
Dude,
dungeon.
they've nerfed those now twice. They nerfed them in that season. They nerfed them into this season. I actually think it's the gauntlet after the tree that is the biggest problem now. That's the reason you don't go that halving.
Oh, okay.
I'm not 100% sure, because I think that it's not that offensive anymore to fight the... They were called Stalkers. I think they renamed them off Stalkers when they adjusted them as well into being like Hunters instead.
Okay.
I really dislike the boss fights in Brackenhide. I think the tree boss just like does nothing. The other guy with the hyenas does nothing, except sometimes you get bit by a hyena and it one-shots you. And then the last boss is like not only super brutal, but the runbacks in the dungeons are insane. Like to me, where the checkpoints aren't a huge deal for how I think about it, but if there's just like a ridiculous, insane run back behind the hardest boss in the dungeon with like possible skips and stuff you need to do, it's just like, man, like I don't know, like how did they not see this in testing? Like, you know, they were just wiping to that boss and then running back. Like, how did they not like, maybe we should do something about this?
Throne of the Tides, Vortex Pinnacle, Temple of the Jade Serpent, Grimrail Depot, Shadowing Burial Grounds, the Everbloom, dungeons they've brought back from previous expansions before Legion. Did any of those dungeons come close to making your top 10, or do any of them stick out to you in any way, super negatively or positively?
They're all pretty dog, except I would say
I like Everbloom.
I like Everbloom.
I like Everbloom.
Yeah, I kinda like
Everbloom is definitely an honorable mention.
I think besides Shadowlands, for me, the best dungeon they brought back might be Everbloom.
I think it's Everbloom.
I'm still on the
Yeah.
Halls train, but
Yeah, Halls of Valor is up there.
Well, Halls
just
was-
considering that all of the other
That's
Well, I
not
guess
what
it
we're
wasn't
talking
M+
about. Yeah, we're
dungeon.
talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
ones
okay.
that weren't Mythic Plus already. Like, well, Shadow Moon stinks bad. And then the Throne, or sorry, Temple of the Jade Serpent kind of still
oh
stunk.
god, that was worse.
Yeah, and then Vortex Pinnacle was also really, really stinky. I guess,
Garbage,
is
yeah.
Throne like the second best one they brought back?
Yeah. Not a
Iron
good
Dogs
look.
was okay.
Oh yeah, Docs was fine. Grimrail Depot wasn't even that bad.
Yeah, Grimrail, it's weird. If you are, there's a lot of common complaints about dungeons, and if you are one of the people where you're like, a pet peeve of yours is when your camera is really restricted with affixes going on, Grimrail Depot is like the worst thing to ever happen to this game. I think if you're someone, and it sounds like all of us kind of don't give a shit about that as much. At least it sounds like Growl, Dratnos, and me at least are not as offended by that. I thought Grimriel was pretty fun. I actually really enjoyed the first boss, like the first trash room. The last boss seemed kind of janky, but I pretty much enjoyed all of it. Also, the second to last boss in Grimriel was like, just didn't even seem like a Mythic Plus boss. It was just like, what are we doing here? Just like a fucking meme item boss. Like that stunk for sure.
It feels like these older dungeons in general are just not very good. I mean, at least the ones they've brought back.
All right, quick
And we're
one.
getting what was this shit called? What were we getting again from Kata?
We're getting Grimbatol in the first season.
Oh
of
yeah, that looks complete dog.
Well, I'm interested. So, interestingly about Grimbatol is actually quite a good dungeon. I'm just really interested in seeing how they handle the first part of the dungeon where you like go up on the dragons and you kill the trash before you land. Very similar to like Vault of the Incarnates, the like RP before you do the first boss. You do something very similar. I wonder if they completely remove that, if they add it and have it actually be cool. Have you guys thought, like, I don't, Grimbatol was one of the best Kata dungeons. It's like top 2 Kata dungeon.
Really?
Yeah, it was a really good one. That one, Lost City of Tolvir, and then some of the later ones they added with the very end of the expansion, like the Dragon Soul patch, like End Time. Some of those were pretty cool. But yeah,
I heard Well of Eternity is insane.
The
I don't know shit about this one.
Yeah, the only one that I am sure if they brought it back, I am like positive. I mean, well, it's really weird. It depends on who you're talking to, because like with High Mythic Plus people, you could have the entire dungeon's theme and all the boss fights and all the trash be cool, but then like one mechanic is overtuned 2 key levels before every other dungeon, and then that dungeon sucks. So like if you're outside of something that niche and specific, I am very sure that Lost City of Tolvir would be a banger. Like, I just think that entire dungeon is sick. Like, almost without even updating it, I think it would be cool.
Interesting. Yeah, I've only done that dungeon in Time Walking, and I got mad lost.
Yeah. All right, I think that's it.
Lost City.
I think that was, dude, that was really fun. We should definitely do this again for.
Yeah, I think top 5 worst dungeons is definitely a banger for whenever we get bored again.
Yep.
You know what we gotta do? We gotta do a top 5 bosses in the last like 4 expansions since like
wait, dungeon bosses?
Ooh,
Ooh,
no, raid bosses.
we could do dungeon bosses too. I actually think something that's talked about less often is how good individual dungeon bosses are on their own, because they're usually tied to the overall success of the entire dungeon. But like some bosses are fucking so insane in dungeon. Maybe raid bosses would be more interesting, but yeah, all that works. Tons of easy content.
I just like remember talking about this recently with just like groups of friends. I feel like there hasn't been as many big hit of raids in the past few expansions. Like I always hear about like how great raids were in Warlords of Draenor and MoP, like Throne of Thunder and Blackrock Foundry and stuff like that. But these like from BFA to now, I can't really say anything too strong about any of these raids.
Well,
What, Sire to Nathri?
yeah, Castle Nathri is an
Sludge
all-timer.
Fist,
Yeah,
Smith, Raznow, Rygelon.
I know everyone always loves fucking. Oh no, I'm talking about raid, like not individual bosses.
Okay, yeah, the whole package.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
Castle
the whole
Nathri.
package.
Castle Nathri had maybe in Dratnos' opinion, the worst second to last boss of all time.
Yeah.
And I still
Worst
think
boss ever.
I
Worst
think
thing I think to have ever happened.
yeah,
Ever.
yeah, he does not. Yeah, I mean, for sure bad. But I wonder. I bet if you were to poll players that have been playing WoW for a while and ever interacted with Shadowlands, I think Castle Nathri would be a universal top 5 raid like of all time selection.
I don't like Castle Nathri. That's my hot take.
I mean, then this would be a good thing to do. Maybe we'll save
good
it till
start.
then. I mean, I have a hockey
That'd
game.
be
I have to
sick.
leave. I have to leave in like
Alright, nice.
30
Yeah,
minutes
yeah.
or so. Yeah, that would be fun. And then you're right though. Like before Castle Nathri though, like going back, universal approval rating is like Nighthold, and then you go back to WoD and you get Blackrock Foundry, and then you go back to MoP and you get Throne of Thunder and Siege, and then you go to Cataclysm and you get
Firelands.
Firelands. Yeah, you get like there was like one or 2 super bangers in like every single expansion. I'm gonna ignore everything from Wrath and before because those are like the ancient times. Like from Firelands onwards, that's kind of where raiding became more modernized. But like you're right, in BFA there was definitely not a all-time banger raid in the entire expansion. You could argue Nathria was, but certainly not anything else in Shadowlands. And I recency bias with Dragonflight, but I don't think anything in Dragonflight would be considered that. Like maybe a Myrdrasil would be the closest thing, but
If you liked Sepulcher, you could maybe like a Myrdrasil. Like they're kind of similar vibe, like giga difficulty, boss
Ooh,
fights,
only the
Sun
last two
Mythic at the end.
bosses.
Yeah, I guess Sepulcher had it
But
a
I
little
mean,
bit
like,
earlier, but
Yeah, like Shadowlands Sepulcher was kind of just like all over the place.
I wonder if that's like on. I was wondering if that was on purpose now. Like, you know how, like before BFA, before Old Year, the first tier of every expansion was intended to be like a little easier. Like Legion had Emerald Nightmare, and Warlords had Heimwall, and Mop had Mogish Vaults, right? Like the intro raid was the intro raid, and then Old Year changed that forever. Now the first raid of every expansion is just a raid. It is no different than any other raid. Do you think it's weird that the last 2 raids, or the last raid of each of the last 2 expansions, has been significantly more difficult than the other raids of that expansion, or do you think that's a coincidence?
My tinfoil is because of the whole season 4 situation. Well, not season 4 situation, but like, you know, them only having 3 patches. I think that's why like they have the last one kind of more drawn out.
Oh,
Especially
I
Sepulcher.
see.
Sepulcher really felt that way.
Yeah, like in
Yeah, I don't know if
BF
I disagree with. I think I disagree with you saying that they're not in any order. I still feel like it's the first raid seems easier. Maybe not ultra easy, but it seems like to me the raids, at least they're trying to. They're not always hitting the mark, but I do feel like they try and make the raids longer and more complicated as the expansion goes on, and they make the first raid with the idea that like there's gonna be way more casual people playing.
since Shadowlands? Like you think Castle
even
Nathria,
BFA too, I think.
you think Castle Nathria and Vault were?
I mean, I think SOD they missed the mark tuning on a lot of bosses that were meant to be very hard, like Fate Scribe, Guardian, KT. I think all those bosses ended up getting cheesed, not how they intended. Vault seemed hard to me. That seemed harder than the first raid. The first raid was like pretty chill.
Wait, no, Vault is the first raid.
Aberrus, sorry. Vault was chill for me. Aberrus I thought was harder than Vault, and I think Amir was harder than Aberrus.
That's. I mean, yeah. Is that? I would assume that's like the opposite of the community's perspective. Wasn't Vault harder than Aberrus? Well.
I mean, Aberrus from my remembering, Sarkareth wasn't terrible, but Echo of Neltharion was really hard for a lot of guilds. Zaskarn was really hard.
Yeah,
it was actually very.
yeah,
then
but
Vault-
like I think for
Vault-
those guilds, like Razageth would have been tremendous,
destroyed
pain,
him.
and
Yeah.
Diurna
Yeah,
even as
well,
well, right?
for Vault, I remember Razageth
Dathia
It
was
was
hard,
easy.
but I
Dathia
don't.
Prague.
Yeah, I guess Dathia.
It was
didn't seem
hard, but it
hard.
wasn't long.
I think it's
like, a lot of these
weird.
bosses were sub 100 pulls.
I think my
Yeah, Dathia and
perspective
Lucifer
is
was hard.
warped too, because I remember like after Aberrus, like because of the gear upgrade system in season 2 of this expansion, it made specifically the race to world first easier because we had more eye level than we ever had. So the take after the race was like, this raid is so much easier than normal raids. But then like the rest of the community, that take changed over time, it seemed like, because everyone else was still killing these bosses at the same eye level they would eventually get at to that point anyway. And it seemed like outside of the top 100 guilds or so, Aberrus was just like a normal progression experience. And it was just more of like a race to world first reaction as to the ease of that. And I probably heard that opinion more than other ones because of who I am. I think. What do you think, Drynos?
I think Aberrus was easier as well, but that might be my
Your guild was really high ranked as well, yeah.
yeah. Like we also cleared,
Like-
we cleared notably faster than we cleared Vault and Amir Drasil, and we also kind of suck on easy tiers historically. Like we Sylvanas as well. We lost ranks on Sark and Sylvanas. So
Yeah. So for the high end community, the second raid of the last 2 expansions was noticeably easier than the first raid. For like Shadowlands and Dragonflight, but I think for the community at large, that may be completely different or wrong.
I think for
I
Aberrus it
think
holds though
it's-
as well. Outside of Skarn, I think that the Aberrus like difficulty curve was gentler than
Yeah, so I think it's
and like it was
two
great to farm as well. Like
things.
oh man, what a great farm raid.
One is like the amount that you guys raid, because like if you're raiding 20 hours, right, then that means you can do splits and you gear up much faster, and you get to that point quicker. Whereas if you were raiding like say maybe 9 hours a week, then you don't get to that point as quick. And also Aber specifically was kind of fucked up because I remember there was a whole Skarn situation where if you
Yeah.
got it down early, then you just extend. And
That was
GG.
one of the most.
There's this card, yeah.
That was one of the
horrifying.
most controversial, polarizing, and for like, I don't think people. Well, some people reacted to this in a very, very bad way towards the developer of that boss. But like, people were justified in their right of being upset. Like, it was a really weird. I want to say it was the only time that a boss was nerfed not on the weekly reset for like the majority of play. Like, I don't think that's ever happened before. And that was also a super polarizing like bug fix cheese thing. And then yeah, that was extremely strenuous. Like,
Well, it
people-
wasn't nerfed, right? It was made harder, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
So
Yeah, well,
how
yeah.
how often do they, not even just on the reset, but how often do they ever make a boss harder?
The time before that, I think, was Tomb of Sargeras with Mistress Sazine.
Wow. So yeah, it hasn't. That's before my time. They've literally
Yeah.
never made a.
And that
boss
was from
harder.
week 1 to week 2.
Right, it was
Uh,
on the weekly reset.
It was on the weekly reset, and it was very early before almost anyone even got to that boss. And it was this scenario was
Actually, no, that's not true. Hold on. Didn't the Council of Blood they like fixed something where?
Oh yeah, the jumping
it's like
didn't work.
jump
But that was like
and then-
right away, I think, right?
that
I don't remember.
so on our kill, it worked. The fight, like, we killed that boss on like 12 or 15 pulls or something, and it on our kill it was mostly like the jumping or whatever was mostly working. It was like doing most damage. Like that difficulty of it not working was definitely overstated. Like, it wasn't like it wasn't working all the time. It was like randomly some pulls, like only 3 of them would do damage, but then like most of them would, and sometimes just nothing would happen. We actually, the pull before we killed it, like we took no damage the whole fight. I'm actually kind of glad we didn't kill it on that pull, because I imagine
That would have been bad.
that because we also, if you remember, we didn't stream that kill.
Yep.
We
I remember that.
because we turned our streams off to not show Echo the right route, and which ended up being really worth it because they didn't know the Dark Recital movement thing. Like, they were YOLOing Dark Recital instead of doing it around the boss like in a circle, and we didn't want to show them that. So we were just like, let's do a couple pulls before bed, and we're like, this boss is easy, let's just kill it. And then yeah, imagine if we killed it off stream and like the boss wasn't working. That would have been a fucking wild time.
Holy shit! Yeah, that's like fucking Yumi TV beating Elden Ring off stream and killing Malekith
Man.
off stream.
Wait, what? You did that?
Yeah, well, by killing Malekith off stream,
I loved those
it was
streams
more like
of
he
you
turned off
both.
the stream, and then I went on his account and helped him kill it.
I loved that stream of both you and Growl playing Elden Ring. I think that's just one of the like best content things that you can do is like, if there's a streamer that you fuck with in any way and you get to watch them play Elden Ring for the first time years later, that is like fucking must see TV. That is an absolute banger.
Dude, speaking of that,
I know what you're
Kaisanat
gonna-
started
yeah.
his he started.
I-
He's at like fucking 100-something K viewers right now, just playing Elden Ring for like the past.
I have to give a big shout out to Kai Cenat because I kind of made fun of him in the sense that he publicized like, oh, I'm gonna play Elden Ring, and I'm like, dude, this dude's definitely gonna just summon and like cheat every boss, and he just went head first into Tree Sentinel for 5 hours on the first day. I'm like, all right, this is it.
Well,
He
that's the
is
thing.
legit.
Like, if you think about it, if he's smart and had someone who knew the game, like, kind of tell him what to do, the worst thing he could do is do any kind of summoning or things like that. Because, number one,
Right.
people, like, the content, let's be real. Do people want to see Kai Cenat, for some reason, be some kind of, like, prodigy gamer that, like, one-shots all these bosses the first time? It's, like, not fun. You
No.
want to see him fucking die and mess up and get
Yeah.
mad and all that stuff. So, like, if someone were to give him any advice, it would be, hey, man, just even, like, don't use summons, but also just, like, throw a little bit. Because, like, it'll just extend the content window, right? It's like Tim the
I
Tatman.
threw a couple times.
You guys remember Tim the
I was, like,
Tatman?
close to killing a boss.
Remember Tim the Tatman trying to win his first Fall Guy game? I don't know if anyone remembers this, but, like, it was like a thing on Twitch where he had insane viewers because he just couldn't win a Fall Guys game for, like, days. And I couldn't tell if he was trolling or just really bad at the game, but, like, he should have kept failing for longer because it was like an event, you know? You should just milk it.
Wait,
Yeah.
that's a content idea. What should I'm gonna steal that actually.
Not turning
Nah, but
my
it only
stream
works with
off.
Some people.
Not turning my stream off until I time a really, really high X level key.
Hey, dude, there's literally a streamer that does that. Have you seen the like 23-hour Spires of Ascension plus 27 or
the
whatever?
Korean
Korean
guy.
guys.
Yeah.
He does that every season.
Yeah, every patch there's just there's
How
a
does
keystone
he
that literally
get-
goes to like 24 hours.
I have seen that. How does he get those 4 random people to stay in the key with him for an entire day? That's what I've never understood. Like, it seems like he pugs them, but
I'm pretty sure he just like gets like a viewer that has like a key that's like willing to stick it out, and then it's just like him and just a bunch of people who are very unqualified attempting it over and over and over.
all right. Anyways, I gotta eat food and go do some shit. But this was super fucking fun. I love talking with you guys about anything. And shout out to Potty C if anyone's listening to this and not listening to the Potty C.
Shout out Potty C.
Yeah, we're doing this all the time. People those are doing more and more well every week. So make sure to
I
check
heard
that
there's
out.
some crazy Patreon content coming, so you guys better get on that.
There is actually. We recorded that last night, and I think tonight or tomorrow or something we're doing more.
Yeah, works for me whenever.
Yep. So pod bye from all of us, and we need to have Growl on the old podcast soon, and we'll see you guys later.
Yeah, right on.
Thanks for the
Anytime.
thanks for the
Thanks
chat,
for
everybody.
having me.
GN, love you.
Yep.
Bye bye.
Love you. Yep. All right. So that's it for me. What? Reptar, are you? What? He's hyped, chat. Reptar. Reptar. Okay, now he's super hyped. Dude, he randomly talks. Yeah, 1 second. Reptar. No, don't bark. Do the cute thing. Reptar. No, come on. Reptar. Okay, whatever. He did the cute thing, but it's usually when I'm like stretching and I'm like, all right guys, I'll see you later, whatever, and then I pretend like I'm gonna get up, and then all the dogs go crazy. Wait, what do I normally say? What do I say that makes them get up? It's like I'm leaning back and I go, all right, see ya. Yep, see ya. Fuck. Oh, I had to look at him. They're like, you're not gonna fucking bait me. Reptar. Oh, it's so cute, man. Anyways, all right. I'll see you guys tomorrow.